It is May 20th, 2024. The time is 6:06 p.m., and we will call this meeting of the Burlington City Council to order. The first item on our agenda is a motion to adopt our agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Thank you, Carter. Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Is there a second? Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor of the agenda, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have our agenda. The second item on our agenda is an acknowledgement of long-term city employee, city engineer Norm Baldwin. And Mayor, this is on the agenda at your request, and so I will turn to you.
Thank you very much, Council President Travers. All right, let's see, my wire will not go far enough. Norm, why don't you come up to the chair if you don't mind for one last official time here. And I would love to just acknowledge Norm Baldwin. This is a real opportunity because Norm has been with the city for 33 years. And it's not in the notes here, but I know that he really started as sort of an entry-level employee here in the city. And one of the things I've loved learning about Norm over the many years that I've known him is really how much it matters when people grow within our city and really rise to new leadership positions and rise all the way up to city engineer. So Norm first started as a traffic field engineer in 1990. And became the traffic division head in 1991. Then went on to be the assistant director of public works and the city engineer in 2000. He took an exciting new opportunity, which we are still excited about, even though we're sad to see him go, and he'll be the new director of the public works for the town of Colchester, so not going too far. And while we're very sad to see you go, you have been a tremendous asset to the city of Burlington. And we're so very grateful for the 3 decades of service you've given to the city of Burlington and public service. Some of his accomplishments, and I'm going to actually start with the one he mentioned this morning at our department heads meeting. I did a little prompt that said, what is one of the moments that you are most fond of as a department head? And he mentioned getting the skate park at the waterfront finally established and opened, and after all the work and process there, and really is such a vibrant not new anymore, but like at the time, it's my neighborhood, a very vibrant part of the waterfront. He's also, among his many accomplishments, worked for the repairs on our amazing bike path. He worked on the epic effort to bring Amtrak back to Burlington, no small feat there at all. He also started the Champlain Parkway after years of delay. As I've heard this phrase, these generational projects, he's had a really strong hand in. He also oversaw the development of comprehensive engineering standards and the reinvestment in lots of aging infrastructure in our city. So we are incredibly grateful to Norm Baldwin for his years of service, and Norm's last day will be May 24th. Norm, thank you so much on behalf of everyone here in the city, and we wish you so well over in Colchester.
Thank you, everyone.
Maybe another time. We get to celebrate him a little bit more on Thursday as staff. So thanks again, Norm, so much. Yes,
Norm, this was our parting gift to you, Norm, was putting you right at the top of the agenda, so you didn't have to wait around to be honored. So thank you. And on behalf of the City Council, also really greatly appreciate all the availability you've given to all of us over the years, myself for the last couple, but I know many people at this table can speak to the hours and days and weeks that you've spent with the council on these important issues. So thank you as well from the council.
Yeah, thank you for that. Chapin was joking me on the way over here that it takes you to leave to be able to get early on the agenda. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Norm. So the third item on our agenda involves 2 anticipated executive sessions. The first item 3.1 and the second item 3.2. Before turning to motions on each of those executive sessions, this is typically where we would turn to the mayor's office or perhaps the city attorney's office to provide a bit of factual background for the public to better understand and to allow the council to make findings that would permit us to go into executive session. So either Mayor or City Attorney McNeil, if I could turn to you.
Thank you, President Travers. The motions to go into executive session deal with actually three particular pending matters. One, a settlement agreement relating to a personnel officer. The other relating to a piece of litigation that is pending with some discussion with the City Council about positions to be taken in that litigation. And the third one is an information update on a third piece of litigation with general direction from the council, nothing specific this evening, but worthy of conversation in executive session in all three matters because premature disclosure could put the city at a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Attorney McNeil. I think on both of your items that deal with pending or potential litigation against the city, we will deal with those with item 3.1. If I could turn to Councilor to make the first motion on item 3.1, please. Give folks an opportunity to pull that up. Councilor Doherty?
So I would move that the council find that, sorry, your mic. Thank you. I would move that the council find that premature general public knowledge of legal advice and information concerning the details of pending or potential litigation to which the city is a party or has a stated interest would clearly place the city at substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Councilor Shannon. Is there any discussion on that motion? So we'll go to a vote then on motion 1 on item 3.1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Then Councilor Doherty, could I turn to you for motion 2 on item 3.1?
Yes, of course. Based upon that finding, I would move that the council go into executive session to receive confidential attorney-client communications pursuant to 1 VSA Section 313 in a pending civil litigation matter pursuant to 1 VSA Section 313.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. Is there a second to that motion? Thank you, Councilor McKnight. Any discussion on that motion? Attorney McNeil.
Could the motion be slightly amended to say pending and or proposed civil action?
Yes, I would make that amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Is that amendment acceptable to you, Councilor McKnight? Okay. Thank you, Attorney McNeil. Is there any further discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. For the record, my understanding is that this executive session will be attended by Attorney McNeil, Assistant City Attorney Sturtevant, Chief of Staff Aaron Jacobson, Deputy Chief of Staff Joe McGee. Is that correct, Mayor? Okay, thank you. We now turn to item 3.2, and then at the conclusion of this motion, we will move into executive session based on the facts put on the record here by Attorney McNeil. Is there a motion on motion 1 for item 3.2? Could I turn to you again, Councilor Doherty?
Yes.
Thank you.
I would move that the council finds that premature general public knowledge of legal advice and information concerning the details of an employment contract would clearly place the city at a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. Is there a second on that motion? Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor of now motion 1 on item 3.2, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Councilor Doherty, could I turn to you now on motion 2?
Yes, Mr. President, based upon that finding, I move that the council go into executive session to receive confidential attorney-client communications pursuant to 1 VSA Section 13A1F regarding an employment contract pursuant to 1 VSA Section 313A1A.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. Second from Councilor Shannon. My understanding is that in addition to the individuals listed on item 3.1, that this may be attended by Human Resources Director Karen Durfee. Anyone further who may be attending, Mayor? Right, and so in addition to the folks that were listed previously. Okay, great. Any discussion on this motion? We'll go to a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We are now in executive session. Public forum is listed for a time certain of 7 p.m., so we will be back for public forum. Thank you very much. Okay, the council just left executive session, and we'll move to the next item on our agenda, which was item 4, public forum, listed for a time certain of 7 p.m. It's now 7:03 p.m., and we'll go ahead and open public forum. Under our council rules, we will hear first from Burlington residents here at City Hall. Okay, thank you. We will hear first from those in City Hall, and then we will turn to Burlington residents online, followed by non-Burlington residents here in City Hall, and then non-Burlington residents online. Each speaker will be provided 2 minutes. When I call your name, if you're here in person, please come to the table. Make sure the microphone is on. You should see the green light lit right on the microphone base, and speak directly into the microphone. For those online, you'll be recognized, and you should be able to unmute yourself at that point in time. When providing comments, please direct them to me as the chair and not to any other individual. It is important that City Hall remain a safe place for those who serve, those in attendance, and those tuning in. The city respects and values the diversity of opinions and perspectives on public issues. We ask, however, that all comments be free from individualized attacks, hate, harassment, obscenities, or other derogatory language about other people or groups based on their age, race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, or any other protected characteristic. We also ask that public commenters avoid conduct which is unreasonably loud, disruptive, or discourteous. If I interrupt a speaker at any point, it will be because I am providing the speaker an opportunity to proceed in accordance with the rules as I've described them. If public comment continues in violation of these rules, at that point I would reserve the right to end public comment for that speaker. With that, we have, at this moment, 10 Burlington residents signed up here in City Hall, so we will turn to those first. The first speaker we have is Kathy Foley, to be followed by Billy Ryson. Thank you, Kathy. Sorry, Kathy, I think you need to make sure the mic is on, and you have to bring it very close.
Good evening. My name's Kathy Foley. Most of you here on the board already know me. For those who don't, I am the president of the Resident Council at Decker Tower. So I want to take just 2 minutes to address a couple of things. With a lot of work from the City Council and from the residents, we were able to get guards at Decker Tower. However, that guard program is, and this is my personal opinion, at this point a failure. I believe that the agreement between the city and Burlington Housing Authority is not being followed, not on the city's part, but on Burlington Housing. The guard started on April 29th, and to this date, there still is no established written protocol for visitors coming in and out of the door, which effectively make the guards almost useless. The guards have had little to no training. On the first night, they had absolutely no training, had never been in the building, didn't even have a chair provided to them for a 12-hour shift. The other important thing that is still missing, along with the protocol, is there's no logbook. Sensor Security has an electronic logbook that one of the guards doesn't even know how to use, and the logbook isn't available for review. So if we're not logging in and tracking where the problem areas are in the building, we can't really fix the building. So that at this point, I think that it's important to let the City Council know that the $38,000 something that the city has provided, in my opinion, is being misused and unsupervised. And this has been addressed. We met with the mayor, the city, our board met with the mayor on May 9th. She addressed some of these things directly. I'll be addressing the BHA commissioners next Tuesday in person, but I still think there's a lot of work to do. Overall, the building is in much better shape than it was in the winter. Part of that is because of the warm weather. But what we're seeing is a backslide. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Next up is Billy Ryson, to be followed by Jane McDougall.
Hi, I'm Billy Ryson. I don't need to say anything. I just checked in, and apparently it's for public forum. So nice to meet everyone.
Okay, thank you. Jane McDougall. Good, how are you?
I have an issue. We have a new,
Jane, I'm sorry. I don't know if the microphone in front of you is on. The one next to you, I believe, is on.
my name is Jay McDougall, but I have a new building right up the road that is a complex for four buildings of an apartments and one a hotel. But the sidewalks are not fixed because we have another building. When are you going to fix the sidewalk if we have a hotel and apartment complex up on Cherry Street? That is the question. It still interferes with Cathedral Square because a lot of the residents cannot use it with wheelchairs and walkers.
Thank you very much for expressing the concerns. Public forum isn't an opportunity for us at the council table to provide these answers, but certainly we'll make sure that the Department of Public Works is aware of your concerns.
Well, I appreciate it because it's been hazardous ever since I've got there.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Next up, we have Dave Mayer, to be followed by Jack Hansen.
Good evening. My name is Dave Marr. Guess I have to bring back the pronunciation guide for some of you. I live in the New North End, and I'm a retired mechanical engineer. Now, Burlington has an ambitious plan to achieve net zero emissions in the next few years. And if we achieve that goal, I'm sure we'll pat ourselves on the back and say that if Burlington can do this, then anyone can. But that's not exactly true. Burlington's plan relies on a lot of green power from outside of Vermont. And there's not enough green electricity around for every city to power heat pumps and charge electric cars. And we can't solve the problem simply by installing more solar panels and wind turbines, because we need base load for those cold nights when the sun's not shining and when the wind's not blowing. It is not feasible to store excess solar and wind energy in batteries or as hydrogen. So the only remaining zero carbon sources for additional base load are biomass and nuclear power. And I'm sure many of you don't like those two options. We in Burlington pay a premium for imported electricity, for bragging rights that our power comes from green sources like wind, hydro, and solar. But there's a funny thing. Electricity from all sources goes into the power grid, and while we like to say that we're getting the green electricity, the electrons from far away power sources don't have any luggage tags, so they can't be identified and shipped straight to Burlington. The power from wind, solar, and hydro is mixed in with power from gas and nuclear. And we pay a little extra to say we are using the green energy. To a large extent, the fact that we claim to be using the green energy simply means that somebody else can't make that claim. And since our plan relies on green energy from outside Vermont, sometimes outside the country, it really can't serve as a model for other cities. So I recommend that we scrap the current plan and come up with a new one that uses only local sources of green energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marr. Next up, we have Jack Hansen, to be followed by Taya Mahoney.
Thank you. I've been glad to hear from talking to some of you all. It seems like there's pretty broad support for moving forward on regulating buildings to reduce emissions. I think you all recognize buildings are the second contributor to the climate crisis. We need action. we're not on track to reach our goals, so it's clear that further policy is needed. I think what is under debate tonight with these amendments, I think has a lot to do with trust and collaboration and working in good faith. As I said, it seems like most of you genuinely do want to work on this and move forward. I think to amend the resolution to say we're going to study this issue and decide if we want to move forward on this is a mistake, because coming from the perspective of a climate advocate, folks feel like, you know, they show up, they try to advocate for these issues, and time again, government lets them down, doesn't take real action, often, you know, diverts towards talking about it, studying it, kicking the can down the road, taking half measures, etc. And to make this vote that takes it from, you know, let's work collaboratively in committee, it's a bipartisan committee with 2 members of each party, so nothing will come out of that committee without, you know, both parties, members of both party on board anyways. So in that context, when folks see an amendment that takes away this concrete action of, hey, let's address this issue, let's work together, let's develop policy to cut emissions from large buildings, and takes that into, let's just study this issue and contemplate it. A lot of folks feel like, you know, why should I even engage? Because clearly they're not going to actually do this. So, as I said, I feel like there is consensus to move forward, but folks aren't going to understand that with an amendment like that. So please vote no on that amendment and support the underlying. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Taya Mahoney, to be followed by Nick Persampieri. Sorry, I believe the microphone might have been, it's the green light that's actually on the microphone itself.
I have to press it myself.
Okay.
There we go. Makes sense. My name's Taya. I live in Ward 8, only for about 10 more days. And then I'm moving out of Burlington. Like a lot of people, it's just not affordable for me. It makes me sad because I was born in Burlington. I grew up in rural Vermont. Believe it or not, there are some people who are actually born in Vermont who still kind of live here. Although most of my friends, honestly, they can't afford to live in Vermont. So if you can't afford to live in Vermont, you certainly can't afford to live in Burlington. It's a lot of my friends who are unhoused. So as I'm leaving, I'm kind of thinking about what my life was like, because I moved here thinking that Burlington was kind of like the Burlington of the 90s, because I was born in '83. It's definitely not that city anymore, and I'm quite sad about that. I wish I could stay. I wish my family could stay in Vermont. I wish we could stay in Burlington, but it's just not an option for us. And I think about when I first moved here and what did work for me as somebody who was pretty poor and kind of just trying to get my life back together, because like a lot of people, I didn't have a job in 2008. And one of the things that pretty much saved me was the bus and the sidewalks, because how else was I going to get around, right? Because if you're poor, you use the bus. So I would love, as we're talking about the climate and housing and all of these things, that we also consider the infrastructure for people who just can't get around easily. It's not just people who are poor who take the bus. I have family members who are not fully able-bodied, who would love to be able to come to Burlington. They can't. My parents, like a lot of people's parents in my age group, are, you know, kind of coming to their end of their life. And if there was some way to get them into Burlington and then also get them around, because our sidewalks haven't really improved much in the entire time that I've been here. And so I guess in my, you know, my parting words is just thank you for everything you're doing, and please just continue to be kind to each other and make Burlington livable. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Nick Persampieri, to be followed by Julia Hondel.
I'm Nick Persampieri. I live in Ward 3. I urge you to support the resolution that Councilors Broderick and Bergman are sponsoring, which would charge TUC with creating an ordinance to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings of 25,000 square feet or more, and would require that the TUC present a draft ordinance to the City Council this October. I urge you to resist amendments that would turn the resolution into a call for further study, The city has been studying building decarbonization since 2021 at least. Burlington Electric has worked with the Building Electric Institute. They've looked at what other cities have done. The time for action is now, and we don't need further study. Regardless of whether the resolution before you tonight is approved, additional work will be required to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings. This includes reforming the Net Zero Energy Roadmap, which as written applies not to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but is focused solely on eliminating use of fossil fuels, and it gives a free pass to so-called renewable sources of energy, which emits high greenhouse gases. There's also a need for reform of the current carbon impact fee ordinance, which incentivizes a number of so-called renewable fuels and systems which emit greenhouse gases. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Julia Hundel, to be followed by Ryan Hagan.
Hi, my name is Julia. I'm a lifelong resident of Ward 4, and I've gone through the Burlington School District through K-12, and I've even served on the Burlington School Board as a student commissioner. I'm here to support the Building Emissions Reduction Ordinance brought to you by Councilors Broderick and Bergman. The City of Burlington needs to do something about climate change now. Not doing anything will only worsen the crisis by pushing the problem further down the line. We know that emissions from buildings are a leading contributor to climate change, so we need to do something now in order to lessen the effects of climate change later. Burlington and the next generation, like myself, we deserve to have a future not impacted by climate change, and not doing anything about it is not doing anything about the crisis is eliminating any future that we, the next generation, and Burlington as a city have for any future. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We next have Ryan Hagan, to be followed by Colin McDermott.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan Hagan. Thank you for all your work. Just want to start with that. I'm also here to echo all these wonderful climate folks and urge you to vote for the resolution on decarbonizing buildings and to not go for the amendment that's going to delay action. We don't have time to wait on this anymore. And I just think this is the most important issue facing humanity today, and the climate solutions that can be implemented can also help out, it can help out with all the other issues that face Burlington right now. There are ways to multi-solve this and invest money into something like decarbonizing buildings that can also help out with housing and economics and justice issues. I just want to voice support for all that and act as quickly as possible, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We next have Colin McDermott, and then the last speaker, the last Burlington resident we have signed up in City Hall will then be Trey Cook.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Colin McDermott. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Vermont, studying environmental studies, if you couldn't tell by the sunburn. And I'll be continuing to live here in Burlington, Vermont's East District. After carefully reading over the 2024 resolution, I feel it is my obligation to the environment and my fellow members of the community to express my full support for the resolution relating to a building emissions reduction ordinance. With regard to climate protection, I think I can safely speak for my peers when I say we all feel a great sense of urgency to make progress in the near term rather than kicking things down the road. Instead, we need to continue pushing toward our environmental goals as our futures count on them, especially those unjustly suffering from the blunt end of climate change. Buildings are a leading contributor of carbon emissions here in Burlington, and therefore we need to place policies to reduce that pollution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The last Burlington resident we have signed up in person is Trey Cook.
Hi, so I want to speak in support of the resolution and against the amendments. As many people have said already, a lot of research has already gone into this to justify taking some sort of action. So the amendment to extend those conversations would only further delay the drafting of what that would look like. I think that the City Council has the authority to decide on whether or not to take action, and that the committee can, do the proper research of what that action would look like. I think that the amendment is inappropriate, and if people wanted to skirt taking this sort of action, that they should have just come here with a justification for voting no on the resolution as written. But I think it's a phenomenal proposal, and it's been a long time coming for us to take more climate action. Buildings are the second largest cause of emissions in the city, and I think that there's been cleaner explanations on this before, but I speak in support of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one non-Burlington resident here in City Hall, but we turn first online to Burlington residents, and we have 5 Burlington residents signed up online. The first individual signed up is Lindsay Mashler, and Lindsay, you should be able to unmute yourself. Thank you.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Lindsay Mashler, and I'm a resident of Ward 1. I'm here to support the resolution relating to a building emissions reductions ordinance. Burlington is making a significant effort to combat climate change, but much more work has to be done. Buildings represent a huge portion of our carbon emissions as a city, so even though we've made some progress, more work needs to be done in order to meet our 2030 zero emissions goal. Larger buildings are the main source of pollution, so by requiring them to reduce pollution, we can make a big dent in the problem. It's a no-brainer to support this resolution if we're serious about securing a sustainable future for Burlington, and I encourage you to move forward rather than to amend this to be yet another study. We are past the time of study. It is time to make policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person we have signed up on Zoom is Adam Franz. And Adam, I do not see you on the attendees list. If you are on the attendees list under a different name, if you could raise your hand and I can come back to you. We will otherwise turn to the next person up, which is Sharon Busher. And Sharon, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, President Travers. First of all, I wanted to say that the resolution that speaks to Marcel Beaudin, I so admired and valued him as an individual and all the things that he did for our community with the sailing center and making sailing affordable for everyone. My condolences to his family, but I just wanted to weigh in on that. So thank those sponsors and for just acknowledging what a great person he was. I have 2 other items. They're 2 budget items. So since the mayor presented her budget to the Board of Finance and did a press release, there have been some feedback, and one is that and my apologies, President Travis, my apologies are to the CFO and the mayor for not putting this in writing in advance. But one thing is that people need a better explanation about the one-time use of the ARPA funds. I don't think people understand that there's a time limit, and if the funds aren't spent, what happens to them? So I'm hoping that that will be explained. And then the second thing is pilot. I once again feel like people don't understand why they think the city isn't being aggressive in getting 100% of that funding. But I think that I'd really request that there be a differentiation between what state properties there are and what the state allocates for funding and what control we have over that versus the nonprofits. So that's my feedback for tonight. And once again, I regret not finding the time today to send this in advance. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. And I will say, for those here in Contois who have been used to historically our having a gigantic timer up on the screen, thank you to the clerk's office who has now embedded our timer into Zoom, such that our Zoom speakers are able to see the timer up there. Hopefully you are able to see it. And just wanted to note that the timer is moving, but thank you very much to the clerk's office for this, this upgrade. We have two more Burlington residents. Oh, I see Adam Franz now raising his hand. So Adam, you should be able to speak, and then you'll be followed by Ashley Adams, and then followed by Evan Gould. Go ahead, Adam.
Hey. All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, all right, thank you very much. I apologize that I'm late. I was at a union meeting. But yeah, I just wanted to speak to express my displeasure at the amendment that's been proposed to Councillor Broderick's resolution. I think what we have, we all know that there's this, serious problem that we have. And yeah, it's a serious proposal. I think that I've seen a long-standing, I guess, problem with legislators in the state legislature and members of, city council sometimes, trying to slow down the process. And one of the ways that comes across is trying to put it to either, a study committee or pushing it to the committee to, instead of creating a direct piece of legislation, to, make a study and come out with a report. And so, I don't think that this is necessarily something that is, intentional or nefarious, but, it is a concern of mine that we have such an incredibly important issue such as climate change. And I think that we don't have a lot of time to look into everything forever. We need to take action. So I'd urge the city council to pass this resolution as written and to not proceed with the amendments that would turn it into just a study for the committees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Ashley Adams. Ashley, you should be able to unmute yourself, and then we'll be followed by Evan Gould.
Hi, yes, I'm Ashley Adams, Ward 6. Burlington is one of the top 5 fastest warming cities in the United States. And globally, we're experiencing rapid warming, ocean acidification, more extreme weather, melting glaciers and sea ice, and rising sea levels due to greenhouse gas pollution, more frequent and severe natural disasters, and rising health risks. So the impacts worsen with every bit of additional greenhouse gas pollution because it traps heat. You can't undo the damage, and continued burning of all carbon-based fuels, including wood, reduces our chances of salvaging a habitable climate. So this is important when you host a 50-megawatt wood-burning plant like McNeil, which, as I've mentioned many times here, is the largest single source of greenhouse gas pollution in Vermont. Additionally, trees cut down to burn are no longer doing the critical work of sequestering and storing carbon and supporting biodiversity, upon which all life depends. Furthermore, with the exception of temporary profits in 2022 due to war-fueled gas prices, McNeil operates at a loss, $4.8 million in 2023 alone. The plant needs to shut down. Electric utilities should not be in charge of climate policy due to inherent conflict of interest. Burlington Electric has stymied real progress on climate. They've promoted false climate solutions and continue to mislead the public by perpetuating the long debunked claim that burning trees is climate neutral. The net zero roadmap should be replaced with a real climate action plan counting greenhouse gas pollution from all sources, including McNeil and the airport. That must be developed. And we also need to correct the thermal heating ordinance, which incentivizes polluting heating sources. I'm here to say that I support the building emissions reduction ordinance sponsored by, but not the amendment package, which undermines the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adams. I do not see Evan Gould online at the moment. We'll continue to look out for him. He was the last Burlington resident signed up for public comment. We have one non-Burlington resident signed up here in City Hall, Kate Neubauer, and Kate, we'll turn to you here. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kate Neubauer. I'm here to thank you for your consideration for the resolution in honoring Marcel Beaudin. Marcel was a visionary and a talented architect. You can see his building designs all over the city, and he had a particular passion for Burlington's waterfront and Lake Champlain. He designed the Burlington Boathouse in 1998, and for the last 30 years, his lifelong passion and project was co-founding the Lake Champlain Community Sailing Center. He designed the facility you see today, and he designed the on-water infrastructure project that was completed a few weeks ago. And he worked on it up until the day before he passed. His dedication to Burlington, the Burlington waterfront and Lake Champlain, has allowed thousands of children and residents of Burlington to experience Lake Champlain through the Sailing Center's programs. And I, as a previous executive director of the organization, are among many people who just want to thank you for acknowledging his work and his passion. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We will now turn back online. We have 3 non-Burlington residents. The first non-Burlington resident is Karen Sita, and you should be able to unmute yourself.
Mr. President.
We can hear you.
Thank you. Queen City, the people of Burlington. My name is Karen Sita. I'm here to talk about the fact that it's Mental Health Month. And I want to acknowledge the one and only Kelsey Chris, our first, well, I don't know if she's the first, but our Black woman, Miss USA, who ended up killing herself due to the pain and suffering that most women endure and don't really have people they can reach out to. I remember Chesley because I was so inspired by a Black woman, an attorney, an overcomer, a beautiful woman inside and out, showing the world that Black women are capable of so many things and they are full of magic. And I also remember the pain that I felt when I was falsely incarcerated, and I thought about the pain that other Black girls would feel when they found out that the state of Vermont created a lie against me saying that I wanted to kill myself. And I just think about women. I think about Black women. I think about our suffering. Oh, how we suffer. And I want to thank all the women out there who continue to fight, who continue to say, hey, there is a lot going on in the city of Burlington and we need to think about the people. I think about the women who say we cannot afford housing, we cannot afford our buses. I think about George Floyd Day, which will be happening statewide on May 25th. I think about Black power. I think about Black unity. I think about love and kindness, love for one another. And on Mental Health Day, people always ask me, how do I survive Vermont? I serve a God who believes in justice. So I hope that our judges, our federal courts all believe in justice. And also the Lord that I serve gives me a sound of mind. Honey, I have a sound of mind. Hallelujah. So I just want to thank all the fighters out there. I always remember the fighters because I know it's not easy. This ain't for the weak. Shout out to all my pretty girls again, because we suffer and nobody seems to care. Because you're pretty, why should we care? But we care. I care. So again, Mr. President, I'm here to acknowledge all the people who are who feel like they're so not seen. I see you and I fight for you. We shall overcome. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Sita. We have 2 folks still signed up online here. First is Quentin Zondervan, to be followed by Kelsey Lynch. Quentin, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. President, honorable city councilors. I speak to you today on the matter of the Building Energy Reduction Ordinance. I'm a former city councilor from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I served 6 years on the city council, and I led the effort to pass a similar ordinance called Beaudin in Cambridge that is in effect today. So I want you to know that this can be done. It has been done. It is being done. Cambridge and Boston have both passed very similar ordinances, and we are reducing the emissions from our commercial buildings rapidly towards net zero. I've sent you a letter as well, urging you to take action on this matter and offering my support and assistance at no cost to yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker online is Kelsey Lynch. Kelsey, you should be able to unmute yourself. You're still showing as muted, Kelsey. You should be able to unmute yourself, though, now. Give you one more opportunity, Ms. Lynch. Okay. Kelsey Lynch is not unmuting themselves, and so that is our last speaker. And we will go ahead and now close public forum at 7:38 p.m. If there are any individuals online that had not signed up for public forum but would like to have spoken this evening, we do have a rule that if you're speaking online, that you are supposed to sign up online at least 1 hour in advance of public forum, but certainly we would encourage your reaching out to the City Council in writing. Next item on our agenda is climate emergency reports. I know we have a climate-related item on our deliberative agenda tonight, but is there any counselor with a climate emergency report? Councilor Bergman.
Thank you. This is a general thing. Now, many of you go to stores like the Co-op or other places and may see the Green Energy Times. It's something that's been coming out for 15 years. It's got some amazing resources in it, and I just happened to pick my copy up today and was struck by the connection between an article that that is in it and an item that we have tonight, which we'll get into, and this is a lead article that says 3 greenhouse gases reached record highs last year. The levels of the 3 most important greenhouse gases, methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide in the atmosphere, reached record highs again in 2023, according to research conducted by scientists with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Global Monitoring Laboratory. And I'll spare us of the particular concentrations, but just to say that we know that this is serious. We have the science, and we've got the proof on the ground when 100-mile-an-hour winds hit Houston this last week. I was hearing a story on NPR about a person who was hanging on for their dear life as their legs are getting flown up into the air. This is something that is a catastrophe. In a way, it's a slow-moving catastrophe that you can see and you go, oh my God, but it is coming. It's as if we can see the iceberg in front of the Titanic as we're out on that deck, and we just have got to act. And I would encourage everybody at this table, everybody who's watching online, everybody in the audience, to take a look at the Green Energy Times. Not only are there important statistics, but there are critically important ideas, things like passive houses that they talk about in this particular issue. We'll get a chance to deal with them later, but it's important for us to hear the context in which we are doing things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Are there any other councilors with a climate emergency report? Okay, we'll turn to you in just a moment, Councilor Kane. Just so councilors are aware, when we're done with climate emergency reports, we will turn to the Local Control Commission if folks want to get that agenda up. But Councilor Kane, we'll turn to you.
Thanks. I'm glad that we're looking at emissions reduction ordinance for buildings this evening. I would like us to just focus more broadly in the coming months on the transportation sector and other sectors. According to a study published in Science last fall, 44% of profits worldwide of corporate profits worldwide would go towards paying for damages for greenhouse gas emissions. This is a much more serious issue than just decarbonizing buildings. So this is a good starting point tonight, and I hope we view it that way as a starting point.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Any other councillors with a report? All right, seeing none, we'll move on from this agenda item, and we will briefly recess the City Council meeting to turn to our Local Control Commission. We will convene the Local Control Commission at 7:42 p.m. on Monday, May 20th. The first item on our Local Control Commission agenda is a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Thank you, Commissioner Newbeezer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That is unanimous. The second item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Commissioner Shannon, as Chair of the License Committee, could I turn to you for a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda and take the actions indicated. And thanks to my fellow councilors for being on the ball when I didn't have that agenda up yet.
Thanks, Commissioner Shannon. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor of adopting the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. That now takes us to our deliberative agenda. We have 4 items on our deliberative agenda. First is item 3.1. Commissioner Shannon, could I turn to you for a motion on item 3.1?
Move to approve the 2024-2025 first and third class liquor license applications for Kismet, 180 Battery Street, Suite 130, with the following conditions contingent upon fire marshal approval. All city permits need to be closed out and with all standard conditions.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Commissioner McKnight. Any discussion on the motion? Go to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Commissioner Shannon, could we go to you for a motion on item 3.2?
Move to approve the 2024-2025 outside consumption permit application for Kismet with the following condition. All city permits need to be closed out.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Commissioner Shannon, could we turn to you for item 3.3?
Move to approve the 2024-2025 first-class liquor license application for Langhouse Bed and Breakfast with the following conditions, contingent upon fire marshal approval and with all standard conditions.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. And our last item is 3.4. Commissioner Shannon.
Move to approve the 2024-2025 outside consumption permit application for Langhouse Bed and Breakfast.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Seeing no other business, we will adjourn the Local Control Commission at 7:46 p.m. and return to the regular City Council meeting, where we'll move to item 6 on our agenda, which is public health and safety emergency updates. I've heard from a number of you that you may have updates here. It was a difficult weekend for our city and community safety here with very public and very troubling random act of violence in our downtown. Certainly on behalf of the council, our hearts go out to the victim of that. But if I could get a sense from councilors as to who would like to provide a public health and safety emergency update tonight. Okay, I have Councilors Grant, Litwin, Barlow. Anyone else? Okay, Councilor Barlow, could we start with you, and then we'll go to Councilor Grant and then Councilor Litwin.
Thank you, President Travers. I, like you mentioned, was horrified by what happened to that 82-year-old gentleman, but I'll let others speak to that. I want to highlight something that was brought to my attention about an international brand that has decided not to move forward with a store in the downtown. They were essentially at the 2-yard line in the late planning stages with the building owner and with an architect. And according to an email shared with me by the building owner, the company CEO has discussed the social issues in Burlington with the board, and they've decided it's too risky to proceed with this store at this time. This is the situation we've feared, businesses not wanting to locate in Burlington because of the mayhem and retail theft in downtown. And it's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Councilor Grant.
Thank you. Just wanted to mention that the Public Safety Committee had a meeting this past Thursday evening, May 16th, and prior to that, our previous meeting was April 18th. As always, I encourage our residents to watch these meetings or, at the bare minimum, review the minutes of the meetings. There's a lot of information that we've been covering, especially with regards to data and other information. The fire department and the police department's budgets for FY25 will be reviewed the evening of the 29th, and information on these meetings can be found on Civic Clerk by once again going to the City of Burlington's website, clicking on the calendar, and then just going to the 29th. You'll be able to see if you wanted to log in on Zoom or just simply get the information. The budgets will be attached to the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Councilor Litwin.
Thank you so much, President. So I've got a couple things to check in about. The first is, as Councilor Barlow started to mention, that there was a terrible incident, I think many people have seen it in the media, of an elderly gentleman over the age of 80 being violently attacked in our downtown in broad daylight, unprovoked, random attack. We've been concerned about that type of an escalation for a long time, moving from targeted attacks to more random. But I'm sad to say that I just came from this meeting, to this meeting from the home of someone who was also randomly attacked over the weekend on the same day in the same neighborhood of Cherry Street, and that did not make the news. And so I sat with that family for 45 minutes today, listening to them, talking to them about what options were available to them as through victim services. I spoke to CAPE this morning. That crime is unsolved. They have not identified the assailant at this time, but it was incredibly troubling for them. They're lifelong residents. They're residents of my ward in Ward 7, and they shared that they're considering leaving Burlington, which they don't want to do, and it's frightening for them at this point to go downtown as they were leaving a nice dinner to have such an incident occur. And I was moved by our meeting today, and I just wanted to say that. And additionally, I had a meeting a couple weeks ago with the head of the Burlington Technical School, which is currently housed at the corner of Cherry and Church in the kind of CVS building there. And again, deeply concerned about what I'm learning in terms of what their safety situation is on a daily basis, attempting to keep students out of harm's way on Cherry Street. I have taken some feedback from them that I'll continue to consider and share at another time, but ultimately, I actually found it shocking, some of the incidents that they've dealt with. They also have 3 transition points throughout the day where students are having to transition in and out of the school. He's had to take several of his staff members out every single transition to ensure that students getting on and off buses or arriving from cars are safe. They have to go to the downtown transit depot to make sure that students are safe there. There's been attacks, staff held at knife point while walking to their car. There's at least 4 staff members who are now refusing to park in the parking garage because they're afraid to walk the length of Cherry Street, and are paying upwards of $1,500 annually in parking meters because they want to be closer to school. So I just want to remind us all, Cherry Street's a school zone. It is for the next 2 to 3 years. And we really cannot afford to have random attacks, violence, period, anywhere in our city, but it's certainly not in a school zone. I'm down there regularly, and I can attest to the fact that Cherry Street has become sort of a pretty dangerous place, a place that can make people feel uncomfortable at any time of day. And I just don't want us to put our head in the sand here, and I want to make sure that with our new budget, we're resourcing our Burlington Police Department, not de-resourcing them, and that we are making sure that we have the officers able to be there so that our exhausted educators are not out on the streets attempting to de-escalate situations. And also was shared with me that we have students coming in from 9 different towns for Burlington Technical School, and increasingly so, students are unenrolling. And that's a cost to the city that should be looked at as well, as students become more fearful, or their families become more fearful of them driving downtown or parking in the parking garages, which they've been advised is not necessarily safe as well. So deeply disturbed by the events of the weekend. I'm worried for our downtown and the businesses. Folks will not want to go out to dinner, and they will not want to shop down there. And as Councilor Barlow said, will not invest in Church Street. So I hope that we can focus on public safety quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Litwin. Councilor Shannon?
Thank you, President Travers. I wasn't going to speak, but I did want to mention just that, not only these horrible things happened, but they were random acts of violence. Perpetrators were caught and then were released back into our community, remain at large. There were the incidents that have been made public. There were other incidents which I'm hearing about for the first time from Councilor Litwin. And there was another incident where people have not yet been apprehended. But I know that the mayor wants us all to be safe and wants to provide that safety. I know that our budget, the way it's being structured, is contingent upon our downtown being a safe place, on people feeling comfortable coming to our downtown, on spending their money and paying the taxes that we need in order to balance this budget. And so I am looking forward to hearing from the mayor on this topic, not necessarily tonight, but in the near future, to address these issues so that consumers, so that we all who come here to these meetings know that we will be safe when we come here. And I think it's very concerning that when we here in Burlington are doing our job, everything that we can to keep our citizens safe, to arrest the perpetrators of random violence, and then they are released. We need to be working with our partners and our judicial system and making sure that the entirety of this system is working. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Any other councilor with a public health and safety emergency update? Councilor Newbeezer.
Yeah, I wasn't going to speak. I just wanted to express my appreciation to all the counselors, and in the midst of, other folks said it more eloquently, but a pretty depressing weekend, and one where we saw real community harm. I'm glad that there is what's seemingly unanimous support to move on data-driven public safety policies. I'm excited to work with our new mayor in those efforts, and I'm incredibly grateful to the administration for finding a way with this budget to both close a nearly $14 million gap and invest in community safety in a responsible and effective way. I'd also just say, want to work with everybody on this council and certainly with partners across the state to make sure that we are adequately resourcing our judicial system, making sure that Montpelier understands that we need more progressive tax reform so that we have the revenue as a state government to make sure that folks are held accountable when appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Newby. Is there any other councilors with an update? Councilor Grant, you have further update? Sorry, your microphone.
Thank you. Just kind of a response. I think, regrettably, one of the things we have to keep in mind is that police officers don't appear out of thin air. And we have continued to have a problem in our city in holding officers who are eligible to retire are tending to retire right away. New officers are not staying, and we really aren't better off than we were a year ago, and that is really disturbing. So we do need to take a deeper look in terms of why we have these turnover issues in order to make sure that if we are spending the money on hiring people, training people, that they stay with Burlington and not go to a neighboring agency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councilors with a further update? Okay. We will then close that item on our agenda and turn to item 7, which is our consent agenda. Is there a motion from any councilors on the consent agenda? Thank you, Councilor Bergman. A motion to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated online. Is there a second to that motion? Councilor Broderick, thank you very much. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Our consent agenda passes unanimously. That then takes us to item 8, which is a budget presentation from the mayor's office. And Mayor Mulvaney-Stanek, would I turn to you on this? Turn to CAO Shad. The floor is yours. And thank you very much for offering this look to the full council into the budget. I will say I know that the Board of Finance has been meeting on this. I'm sure CAO Shad, as you'll speak to, we've been in the midst of the marvelous nights of May, as we call them. And but I'm very glad to take this time here at the full council to talk about the FY25 budget. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I will pull up these slides. All right. Great. Nope. All right. So we will dive right in. Tonight we are just going to talk about the general fund. That's enough. If you would like to hear about capital, come on Wednesday, because we will continue going through some of our general fund departments, and we will have a presentation on capital. But for tonight, we will start with the budget principles as the mayor laid them out for the FY25 budget. The first one is very important. We are committed to affordability for Burlington taxpayers, and marrying that with these next 2 bullets. Identifying sustainable financial practices that move us away from relying too much on one-time funds. And when we talk about the one-time ARPA funds that are in this budget, I will refer back to the point that Sharon Busher made. We are working to right-size the size of our government and making sure that we can provide what the community needs most now, as well as when we look into the future. We want to be fair as we're raising new revenue, and that we're doing that equitably across the community, and also ensuring that this budget reflects the priorities of our city. As we just spent a lot of time talking about, community safety really tops that list, as well as maintaining city services, being good to our employees and unions, and engaging the public on some of these larger questions about the size of our government and priorities. These are some of our assumptions, and for those of you who have been in on past presentations, these have been updated slightly. All of our current staff is included in this current budget. This year, we have settled on a 7.5% methodology for attrition, and that's for all departments except fire and police, and we did that based on historical data. There are currently 22 positions that we are holding vacant for the year in this budget in order to get savings. We have been working with affected department heads to increase user fees according to the study that we just received. And again, we are proposing to use some of the remaining ARPA funds, and those funds do need to be obligated by the end of this calendar year. If they are not, we need to return them to the federal government. Here is where we are currently landing with the general fund budget and where that places us in terms of a historical context. And then we get into the solutions here. The first one is tax revenue. And you'll see here there are several different areas from which we will get additional tax revenue. And that is, as you may recall, partially because we've got kind of a complicated tax system here in Burlington. The first one is we will move forward with the 2-cent increase to the police and fire tax. As you will recall, that was approved by the voters at 3 cents, and we are proposing to use 2 cents of that increase. We are then proposing to increase the non-lodging portion of gross receipts from 2% to 2.5%. And you'll see at the bottom of this slide, we are proposing that this increase sunset after 1 year. And as a reminder, this would not affect the hotel tax or the short-term rental tax. This is all other portions of gross receipts, so meals, alcohol, admissions, and amusements. We had previously discussed raising the hotel portion of gross receipts from 2 to 4%, and that's still there. And then the retirement tax and the debt tax are also included on this slide. Those are not taxes that we need this body or the voters to approve. Those are taxes that either raise or lower depending on what the budget is that we need to pay for the retirement benefits for the employees who have left and the interest payments on debt already incurred. So all of that leads us to a total of increased taxes of $5.8 million. We have received just today the final draft of the user fee study. The purpose of this study was to make sure that we understood exactly all the costs that were going into all of the various services that we provide. And what do we mean by user fees? These are fees for services such as the campground, marina fees, classes and camps, things of that nature. And so we have found that in reviewing the report, the clerk treasurer's office and permitting and inspections, those departments are essentially recovering their costs. And you'll see later in these slides for fire, Parks, Rec, and Waterfront, and Burlington City Arts, there are opportunities to increase those fees. The mayor and I met with each of those department heads today, so we will probably be making even some further changes to the slides we're reviewing now, but we have included estimates, and of course we will bring those as appropriate to the various committees and this body. We are proposing to strategically use one-time funds, and this is far less than we currently have in the FY24 budget. We are proposing to use just over $2 million of the unused ARPA funds, and again, that's coming from projects that where that money was already obligated, and those projects are now finished, and so we need to re-obligate that money before the end of December in kind of a use it or lose it scenario. We are also proposing to use $300,000 from the Housing Trust Fund in order to free up that money in ARPA. We have also put into this version of the slides 2 new things that the Board of Finance has not seen, and that is the use of opioid settlement money. You all may recall we currently have 2 agreements signed that have funds flowing to the city for at least a decade. Every agreement that we sign is different, but I think the first one is for at least 11 years, the second one is for 18 years, and we've signed on to a 3rd agreement, and because of some pending litigation that's totally out of our control, we have not received payment from that 3rd agreement yet, but we expect that very soon. And then so we call that one-time money. It's not exactly one-time money, it's sort of time-bound, and that's why I put the asterisk there. And then lastly, in FY23, we had some money left over from REIB, and this was specifically around the empowerment funds. And so that money was put into what we call our assigned fund balance. We thought we'd be able to use it this year, and as you've seen, REIB's come in under budget this year. And so we're proposing to use that for REIB's activities in FY25. Now we move on to budget savings. As I said, we have 22 positions we're holding vacant. That amounts to $1.4 million of savings. We've got savings from various programs that were detailed in another attachment that come in at $900,000. Then we've got our water department and our airport, both enterprise funds, who were able to pick up some more eligible expenses from the general fund. And then this last one, we have always used capital money to pay for capital salary work. But in our first draft of the budget, we had not included any of that. As we're trying to come up with a sustainable methodology. And so in this version of the budget, we do have $500,000 of capital bond money paying for people who are working on capital projects. Then we've got some other savings here. Most of this is pretty self-explanatory. The corrected water stormwater wastewater pilot might be deserving of some conversation. That's an additional $400,000. And that also sort of gets to one of the questions that former Councilor Sharon Busher asked about pilots. And if anyone's following along at home, like, what's a pilot? Payment in lieu of taxes. And pilots are paid by both the state of Vermont as well as our water utility and our electric utility. And the way the charter is written, it is written such that each of those entities must pay what a private entity would pay, an equivalent to what a private entity would pay in taxes. And in order to come up with that amount for our utilities, it is not straightforward at all. And frankly, the people in my office who help water calculate that, we're very busy with the budget. And it's not a great excuse, but that's what happened. And when they went back and made some corrections, we came out $400,000 to the good. There are a few other things in here. We've talked about asking some of the other non-property tax paying entities, nonprofits, where we don't have an agreement, to help us increase vacant and inspection fees. There's a little more we could do on increased interest on taxes. That doesn't mean we're increasing the interest. It just means there's a little more we could put in for revenue, as well as increased gross receipt collection. And that brings us to this summary slide where, as you can see here, at this point, we've got $13.8 million of the $13 million we were trying to identify. And that is because we are trying to have additional money so that we can make investments specifically in community safety. And we've got a little bit on what's next. We're taking your feedback, and we will have a detailed version of the budget to you no later than June 15th, because that's what the charter says. And since we have a meeting on June 10th, it will probably be June 10th. Mayor.
Thank you, CAO Shad. Again, thank you for all of your work and your staff's work on this. I just want to highlight a couple other brief things before we open it up for questions from folks. We worked to make sure we itemize. The slides were a very high-level piece, and I just want to make sure councilors saw over the weekend we sent an itemized sort of tabbed spreadsheet to get really specific about what we were talking about. I appreciated that feedback during the budget information meetings last week, and so really wanted to make sure that you knew what we were counting and what was being moved around in case, and again, happy to answer any questions you may have on the detailed version. I also just want to say that I'm proud that the work to close this budget gap did not include any layoffs. That was a hard challenge, facing a $13 million gap a month or so ago. And not only did we avoid any layoffs of current city staff, we also identified additional funds. And as it was alluded to in the second to last slide, that's very purposeful to start doing strategic investments in community safety, something many of you addressed in an earlier agenda item tonight. I'll speak a little more to that in mayor comments at the end of the meeting for anyone who's still following at that hour. But it's really important to me to make sure that we are moving things more immediately that we can with strategic investments. That's also why we pulled in the opioid settlement funds. Again, the budget process, I'm learning, is very iterative. There's little numbers here and there that go back and forth, so that's why we really want to get everything right for you for the final presentation in June. But again, with the opioid settlement funds, that's very purposeful so that we can start moving that strategically and purposely for things that are impacting and benefiting folks struggling with opioid misuse and substance use disorder. And that's things like, for example, our CRT program through the fire department, which was not in the original fire department's fiscal year 25 budget. I think that's a critical investment. Those are an example of what we'll be bringing to the budget information meeting on May 29th. We convened a bunch of departments, cross-department-wise, to start that conversation of where those investments would go if we could find extra money, and that's what we're working on right now to bring to the 29th. And the other thing I just want to emphasize, also mentioned, there is a small portion of one-time funds, some in this proposal. There was not a way to do this without increasing more taxes, and that is not something I am looking to continue that practice in future years. It was a necessity at this point. Thankfully, we had a little bit of both ARPA money and some other one-time use funds we could repurpose, but that's not a good budgeting practice, and I'm looking to move away from that for fiscal year 26 and certainly into the future. The other big piece, I'm sure you'll ask questions about, between the two studies that we received from consultants, is both of those pieces are good tools for a roadmap of what comes forward with fiscal year 26 and years beyond. And I'm happy to speak a little bit more to this, but those studies really brought limitations of what we could possibly put into this fiscal year's budget with a month, basically, 2 months of a runway. And that's because there's some important changes that are proposed there that deserve good community dialogue, deserve good dialogue with our city staff, our unions, our department heads. There was just not a responsible way to bring that forward, the bulk of which really would represent the significant cost savings with the kind of timeline that is offered in a transition for administration. Similarly with the fee study, and we are happy to go a little bit more into the weeds, but you'll see when those particular general fund budgets are presented in the coming 2 weeks, so that's Fire, BCA, Burlington City Arts, and Parks, Rec, and Waterfront. Again, that study was a little bit of a challenge to implement fee changes with some of those programs that have put those fees in place already for summer camps for fiscal year 25 have already been published and put out. Several pieces related to parks, similarly BCA and parks, for example. So we're working with the realities and the constraints of our fiscal year starting. And when you get into the weeds, you realize it's trickier than you realize to you just take the recommendation from the study and plop it right into our fiscal year 25 budget. So we did the best we can. We're continuing to work with those departments. I appreciate those departments really digging deep, and we will continue to try to push as much as we can into fiscal year 25, but it is again more of a roadmap for fiscal year 26 and beyond. And then finally, let's see, I spoke to the 2 studies. I think I'm going to be quiet and see what questions you have, because that's enough for me for the moment.
Thank you, Mayor. Very much appreciate the presentation and all the information. I know that we do have upcoming Marvelous Nights here in May and Board of Finance meetings, but we have a working session here now. There is no action item on this agenda item, but it is an opportunity for councilors to make comments or to ask any questions. And so I would turn to councilors now to see if they have any questions or feedback. We'll go to Councilor Shannon and then McKnight, Barlow, Litwin, Grant, Kane, hold on one second. Grant, Kane, Doherty. So I have Councilor Shannon, McKnight, Barlow, Litwin, Grant, Kane, Doherty, Newbeezer, Carpenter. So we'll start there and then see where we're at. Councilor Shannon.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It's very informative, and I appreciate all the information and the responsiveness to requests. I have what I think is a new request. So I like the idea of, rather than further burdening property taxpayers, putting that on a consumer tax. But the problem with doing that is that the property tax is a more reliable source of income. There is less predictability with this consumer tax. And so I wondered if you could share with us some information about the assumptions of how we're going to generate this revenue, what the history has been with grocery receipts with hotels. The hotel tax would not only be a matter of, hotels attracting, keeping the hotels full, but also the rates change depending on the demand. So even if they're full, if the demand goes down and the prices go down, we are getting less money out of that tax. And so, understanding the history of how stable that revenue has been, understanding from those who are impacted by that, what their concerns, if any, are, because basically, I don't see this as an us versus them situation. They need to be successful for us to be successful here. So I don't know how much consultation there has been with the hotels and businesses that are impacted by the gross receipts tax increases. But I think we all want assurance that we're going to be able to meet those goals. And probably more important with this tax is that we have some benchmarking in place so that we know if we're not hitting our marks, that we're going to have to make changes because we can't control that revenue source. The other thing is that the ordinance committee, Councilor Bergman had asked at our last ordinance committee that we set aside time because many of these things will require ordinance changes. And so your ordinance committee is prepared to discuss this at 9 a.m. on Thursday morning, but we don't have yet a request on exactly what is being asked of us. And so it would be very helpful to have that as soon as possible. And I apologize, I left that ordinance committee meeting and went to my daughter's graduation and got back late Sunday, so had not yet communicated that to you, but I would appreciate that. And also for counselors to know that we're having that meeting outside of our committee meetings, part of the agenda, that if counselors wanted to weigh in on that, we have a bit of a chicken and egg problem. We haven't resolved or adopted this budget, but we need to be prepared and having these discussions to make sure that everything goes smoothly. Thank you.
As a point of information, Council President.
Yes.
So that request has been made on the city attorney's office, and the gross receipts tax has been drafted, and request has been made to share that with Attorney Sturtevant so that she can bring it to our agenda for our next special meeting. So,
Thank you,
good
Councilor Bergman.
catch.
Yep. Thank you, Councilor Bergman.
Thank you.
Shannon.
Yes, having these communications with the committee chair would be very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing now, though, Councilor Bergman. Just thank you.
If I can just respond,
Yep,
Mr. President. Councilor Shannon, thank you. I mean, I know, and I'm having a front row seat of this, this is really a team effort to try to pull something like this off. So now, and also trying to turn to all of you as early as possible, I realize all the timeline issues. So just working backwards from your comments, Councilor Shannon. So I appreciate the special meeting on Thursday. I appreciate getting things moving as quickly as possible through the ordinance and drafting process, and look forward to partnership answering questions, trying to queue things up so at least it's an option when you get to your deliberative process as a council with the options we're proposing. On Friday, I'll be meeting with business community members. It's being pulled together by our Business Workforce and Development Department, so it's a Zoom at 9:30. I'm sure that our department head is able to invite anyone who's listening who wants to sit in on that business leader meeting I'm having. I anticipate talking about the gross receipts piece. I anticipate doing a lot of listening and engagement to hear their feedback on that. As I mentioned in the beginning, or maybe perhaps it was the press conference last week, this is a small way to spread the need that we need to have to increase revenue. So it's not just on property taxpayers. That's why I also wanted to be strategic of only doing half a percentage point and also putting a sunset. So to your very point, Councilor Shannon, that we see how it goes, that is not a permanent fixture given the realities that we're living in. And I do think and know that we can do multiple things at once. And so that's why with these community safety investments and us changing the practice of knowing what we're doing right now is not working and we could do more and we could do better, that's exactly what we're launching at the same time. So we're gonna have to do multiple things at once, and that's really the thinking here. The other piece, I also, just to your point around seeing how it's going, regular reporting back, especially on this budget, is going to be important throughout the year. We've talked with Board of Finance about this, so we can make adjustments. In the legislature, we do a big budget adjustment process. I think that's key to make sure we're keeping you up to date with how things are going in a number of areas, not only how is it going with our gross receipts, our hotel tax, but also these fees. We've been having that conversation with department heads. We don't want to over-rely and be Pollyanna about it. We have to be responsive in real time. So that is our commitment.
Thank you, Mayor. Anything further, Councilor Shannon?
No, thank you.
Councilor McKnight?
Thank you. So I want to echo the comments, thanking you all for all the hard work on this budget process. I've been watching along, and it's literally hours and hours of extremely detailed work, and I really look forward to seeing more of those details. But for the purpose of tonight's meeting, I kind of wanted to zoom out and look at the big picture, because in the end, ultimately, there's been a lot of focus on balancing the budget, but I don't think we don't really get points for just balancing the budget. We get points for results. And I think we heard from voters this year, they sent a really clear message about the budget specifically, which is unusual, and I think we're lucky to have had that feedback. The voters stepped up to fund additional investments in public safety, and there was an understanding that with that willingness to pay public safety tax, there were going to need to be tough choices, and we were going to need to really think creatively to present bold ideas. And I know most of us were only sworn in about 8 weeks ago, but we've all really had since, it's been since last fall, last winter, that we've all been thinking about this. We've had the time to come up with bold ideas. And I worry that the approach to this budget season in kind of a sort of a stopgap effort to hold us over until we can get into the real work, so to speak, I worry that that doesn't deliver on our residents' expectations, because they also send a clear signal that people want change. I mean, and we can see all of that by how many new faces are in this room. I think we have a mandate to affect change in Burlington, and this is our first big opportunity to do it, and I worry that we're not quite delivering on that yet, so I want to talk more about that. Specifically, I'm wanting to talk about the vacancies strategy. I'm really concerned that keeping these positions vacant or at least some of them, I'm concerned it's going to make our problems worse when we desperately need some of these positions to improve the quality of life and the quality of our safety in Burlington. Right now, and I really appreciate the detail, sharing this ahead of time, it was helpful to look it over. Specifically, I was concerned to see the open housing administrator position in the Department of Permitting Inspections. We don't have the exact job description, but essentially the folks in this role do the work that is so important, ensuring landlords don't violate regulations, that construction is in compliance, and this department will also be key to implementing the neighborhood code, which is expected to, stimulate a lot of new housing units being built, and help us address the housing crisis. So this department seems like one we should be adding to rather than keeping vacancies in. We're also not increasing our CSOs when we need more investments in safety, which is a choice I really can't support. I've personally noticed a very meaningful difference in our downtown area and the safety, the feeling of, and the sense of safety since those CSOs have come on board. So I'm just wondering, why aren't we looking more closely, instead of kind of a blanket vacancy approach, why aren't we looking at the city services and seeing, what can we do less of? What can we do less frequently? And while we make, because I think there is a willingness for residents to make a compromise in one area while we make an investment in public safety. So, little things like, can we mow the grass less often? Can we make snow removal adjustments based on climate change? These things are changing all the time. I know it's hard to do. These are a lot of things I'm throwing out here. It would be difficult to do all of it so quickly, but I think we can do some of it. We can do something that's, bold and fast, and then, like you said, we can iterate and make adjustments as we go along. So I'm asking for more of that in the next draft. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McKnight. Councilor Barlow, to be followed by Councilor Litwin.
Thank you, President Travers. First of all, I want to thank you for the additional work that was done. I was pleasantly surprised to see the amount of one-time money fall from 3.7 earlier draft last Monday to 2.9. So that's definitely a move in the right direction. But I have a specific question that I was thinking about as I looked through the vacancies that we're leaving open in Burlington Police Department, the 7 sworn officers and the 3 CSOs. And as I thought about that, I was thinking about how when we went into budgeting last December, one of the things that we said that we weren't going to do was reduce either fire or police, because they had recently had their own studies that sort of set the employment levels there. And so when we raised the public safety tax, 3 cents of public safety tax, I just was doing a calculation, each penny raises about $675,000. And so we're taking $675,000 from a dedicated public safety tax that would only be able to be used for operations at Burlington Police and Fire Departments, and we're replacing it with $777,000 of gross receipts tax for 1 year. And I guess my question is about the fungibility of the gross receipts tax versus the restricted nature of the public safety tax. And is there an assurance from the administration that the money raised from the gross receipts tax equivalent to the amount that we would have raised if we raise 1 cent of public safety tax will be restricted or used exclusively for those public safety needs that we told the voters back in March when we asked them to support the public safety tax and asked them to support taxes with admittedly some different assumptions on how we were going to solve the budget problem. But can we assure them that this money is still going to be used for public safety? And then with regard to those positions at BPD specifically, we know that we haven't been able to hire the positions that we've needed at Burlington Police Department for the last couple of years. We've been trying to fill those positions, but we also know that a lot of the money that we budgeted for BPD that hasn't been able to use to fill those new positions has had to be used for overtime, and also used for other public safety resources to augment what we can do with Burlington Police Department. So I guess I'm wondering if we're removing the 7 FTEs of sworn officers and the 3 CSOs, the money that is associated, the budget money that's associated with those positions, might we not need that for the overtime requirements for the existing officers we do have? We know that we're going to have the same amount of need. It's just we're going to have fewer people fulfilling that need, and I think that we need to take a close look at that. And so that's an area that I'm really sort of curious about. The other thing, and I know I've asked for this, and I don't know if it's the intention to provide it or not, but I would really like to see the user fee, or excuse, not the user fee, I'd like to see the user fee study if it's available now, but I'd also like to see whatever draft there is of the operational analysis that the administration's using to decide that the savings are too strategic and there's nothing tactical that we could do in the shorter term. I'd like to see the same information that the administration's seeing, since we're moving away from the $3 million of savings that we had also told the voters that we would be able to get from the operational analysis. So if there's a way, I understand it's a draft, there's confidentiality, but if there's a way we could see that, that would be helpful as well. And I'll just stop there for now. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Yep,
If I may respond, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilor Barlow. So just working backwards again with your questions and remarks, I also want to share the operational efficiency study with everyone. It's due back on June 4th. We just made contact with the consultant to see when the final report would be back. That's because we provided some feedback the first week of May or so for them to really finalize their, not only clarify their assumptions, but finalize their recommendations. It's something I would like to bring to the department heads first. Not all of them will have seen on detail that, but within the week, I'd like to explore how we can share that with the council so you can see what I see. I was also told, as mayor-elect, that this study, don't worry, this study will yield $3 million of what I thought the budget gap was at the time. And I want you to have all the information I have. I totally agree. I think that's how you're going to make the decisions and come hopefully to a similar conclusion that this administration has had to get to around getting more creative. And this is the roadmap, to Councilor McKnight's comments, to really do that kind of bolder policy work. And when you see the information, I don't mean to be vague about it. When you see the information, you'll see how we have to do this very diligently. There's union contracts we have to honor. There's departments that have grown. New ones have emerged. There's a lot of big, important questions to be asking, and I think it's very timely, but that is not something, again, that could be done by July 1st. To the questions you had about police and fire. So in the FTEs, I'm going to refer to that spreadsheet that has all the tabs. So you'll see there that this budget does include 10 new sworn officers beyond what we have in fiscal year 24. We worked very closely with the leadership at Burlington Police Department to ask them to look at what their hiring patterns are, their goals for the upcoming year, and to include the number of officers they can stretch to hire for this year between police academies and who they have in the pipeline at this point. So that number 10 comes from them. So that left 7 to the total 82 sworn officers. And so the chief and the folks we've been working with in leadership said, we can only get 10 in fiscal year 25. If more come online, awesome. We will figure out a way to adjust and hire. That would be a really good problem for a budget adjustment. But this is the reality check that we were able to get to around putting real numbers in and not having a higher number that we can't possibly hire in fiscal year 25. That's part of my commitment, the transparency, and really reflecting what's possible here. Similarly with the CSOs, I had a very similar question. Why would we not want all the CSOs? This came again from the chief. He recommended the shift schedule is what should dictate the number. They really feel like 8 total CSOs is what the schedule really needs and is reflective of the need that they've been seeing in the community. And again, working in partnership with that department head, that felt like the right number to put forward. We will assess. The other thing to your comment about the budgets overall and what the public will see, the directive given by the last administration, which I held to as well, is each of the operating budgets for all the other departments except police and fire were asked to not go beyond their fiscal year 24 operation budget. Police and fire were allowed to go above. So their operating budget's baseline is bigger. And so I just want to really emphasize that for the council and the public to know they are bigger budgets than fiscal year 24, unlike other departments who take general fund dollars. The public safety tax is very much restricted per charter to only go to police and fire. So that's where that money will go. Why I was not only for the affordability and sharing the need for more revenue, that's why the gross receipts piece is an option there, but it provides a little more flexibility because as we start understanding comprehensive community safety needs, I look to the library, I look to our parks, I look to other places where police and fire aren't stationing a police officer, for example, where we're hiring private security, where the library has requested additional social services, for example. That is not stuff per charter that we could put that kind of community safety investment towards. So for me, this is about making sure we have a little bit more flexibility to do modern day community safety and really put money and dollars in places that can hopefully have an immediate impact on our community based on the requests we're getting from our community, but also our department heads. And that's, again, May 29th, look for more. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Councilor Litwin.
The good news is that I think I can keep my comments brief because Councilor McKnight and Councilor Barlow asked almost all my questions. So it's clear that it's on all our minds and the minds of our constituents. Probably because I'm also catching up from your Sunday spreadsheet email, and so I apologize. I just want to make sure I'm clear that when you are saying, and I'm looking at the spreadsheet here with the 75 sworn officers versus the 85. I'm not sure I felt clear on the answer about Councilor Barlow's question about the need for overtime. And then additionally, if the 3 cents versus the 2 cents is restricted to police and fire, I'd love to better understand the rationale behind that. And maybe I'm just not following along. But I felt that I probably knocked on over 1,000 doors, and that was the number one issue that folks came to me with. And if you recall, we went through a reappraisal recently that was very painful for a lot of folks all over the city, and yet I found people very willing to support a 3-cent public safety tax increase in the spirit of and with the effect of that we would be supplementing the bare minimum that we're already doing, that this would be something additional. And so when I see that we're not using the full 3 cents as intended, I'd just love to better understand that.
Well, to the public safety tax, that's per city charter language. So when you look at it, it literally says for only use of police, and I'm not going to read the charter because I don't have it in front of me, but it literally says for the police and fire departments, period. So that is the restriction there. And then in terms of the new officers, I will get back to you on a little bit more unless the CIO wants to jump in. But we're still going to need over time, even with the 10 new officers that they know that they can, or well, again, their goal based on their hiring practices is what they think they can hire. So that is our reality. But it is the reality of every police department in the state of Vermont. South Burlington has a vacancy rate of 25%. We aren't alone at this point, and so I want to emphasize this is a Vermont challenge. It's a regional challenge about hiring police officers. It's just very hard to do. So for the next year, overtime is going to be a component of it. Again, happy to get more details from our department around how that changes with 10 new officers. Again, remember, they have to go through the police academy before they're on the street. There's a whole lag that's also part of the hiring process of police. It could be with the realities of the residential program for the police academy. It could be 8, 10, sometimes 12 months for a police officer to show up on the streets of Burlington, even if they get hired tomorrow. So this is as much about making sure people understand that process and the reality of our workforce challenges, hiring challenges.
Thank you. And can I just ask, so I think you pointed out, Councilor Barlow, that each penny is worth $675,000. So I'm wondering, what is the rationale between leaving $675,000 on the table that we've been approved up to?
I don't want to tax people if we don't have to.
Okay. And then lastly, I just wondered if you've thought about or are thinking about any changes to how we police at the airport and what types of possibilities we might be able to explore to get some of those officers. I realize there are many reasons why we have to have officers at the airport and many laws and restrictions to that case. So I'm just curious if you're open to exploring possibilities about, for instance, regional shared responsibility of policing the airport, since it's a regional asset. And boy, don't we often hear that our problems are a Burlington problem from folks outside of Burlington. So I'm really interested in exploring, for example, having anyone with a seat on the airport commission ponies up a police officer. And so maybe we can all look at the airport commission charter and explore that possibility. And so I'm just wondering if you're open to looking at policing at the airport differently over time.
Director Longo has looked into other area police forces. As I mentioned, they're all pretty much facing the same workforce shortages and aren't able to provide even for spot coverage, was what the director was looking at initially. And as the chief of police has mentioned, and it's a conversation I'm sure he'd be happy to have with the council as you dig into the details, the question becomes oversight of the police officers at the airport. That's a policy decision. I am open to creative ideas. I think we haven't looked far enough beyond just a police department for security, so we should be open for creative ideas. And if you have them, we're more than happy to talk it through. But those are just briefly what I've been told as we've asked those same questions. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Litwin. Councilor Grant, followed by Councilor Kane.
Thank you. I just want to say, in addition to the information provided about the number of police officers, the issues with CSOs are similar. We could have up to 11. We have not been able to fill those positions. We currently have 6. So we wouldn't be letting anybody go. We still have room to have 2 more. In addition, the CSO position has become a kind of recruiting place. We've had people start as CSOs and then end up going to the academy, applying to be officers, but then some of them don't stay. So that is a problem that we need to be willing to deep dive, because for some people who are leaving, they're not leaving the profession, they're going up to UVM or other agencies, so that continues to be an option. And I just want to say, with regards to the police department, one of the things that came up a few months ago was that we were in arrears to the company that manages and stores the body cam footage And there was also a need for new tasers and some other things. So those are going to be in the budget as well, and they're going to obviously be really important. Some of my other questions were answered. I just wanted some more specific information on the empowerment funds. So reassigning, what empowerment funds are we reassigning to be like one-time funds to use? Like, are we taking anything away from what was promised this year?
No, we are not. These are FY23 funds, so from the last fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor Kane, to be followed by Councillor Doherty.
Thanks. Just want to touch on the use of the public safety tax versus the use of the gross receipts tax. My understanding, and these are rough numbers, is that the average property in Burlington pays something like $6,000 a year in property taxes, and that's going to go up by something like $1,000 a year, irrespective of this particular decision about the use of the public safety tax, which, each 1% of those 3% that we choose not to use, I think costs us about, by my math, based on the presentation, $675,000 of revenue, which per household, 17,000 households in the city, that's about $40 a year in property taxes, each 1% of the 3%. So you can either ask citizens who are already paying an extra, a little over $1,000 by my math, $1,250 or so, per an average household. We can ask them, take another 40 or a few more 40s on top of the $1,250, or pay it as is presented in the slides. You go out for $200 for a meal, you pay an extra $1, or you go for a hotel stay, an extra, it's like $8 or $9 a night. So that seems more equitable. And then there are also, of course, underlying issues with the property tax system. So there was this presentation from Joe Minicozzi of Urban 3 at the Board of Finance on January 8th that highlighted inequities in the tax system, where, for instance, more expensive properties are taxed at a lower percentage of market value than less expensive properties. There's about a 20-25 percentage point price-sales ratio gap, as he refers to it. And this is on a system that, even as it's written, is only intended to be flat, not progressive. So you're supposed to pay taxes on, equally on every dollar of value of your home. So we have a property tax system that is broken, that is going to be leaned on much more heavily. So personally, I don't think we should be using any of the 3% that we are authorized to use. And I think the fact that voters authorized it doesn't mean much. We didn't ask them if they support increasing gross receipts tax on hotels or meals. I'm sure, given that they're already facing the $1,250 a year increase on their property taxes, I imagine that leaning more heavily on gross receipts would have been very popular. So I support moving in that direction, and I am concerned that we're not being ambitious enough in terms of how much we're increasing the gross receipts tax. So one of the PowerPoints suggests that we'd be going up to, with the state and local components together, 13% for the hotel tax, and that's still below the 14% median that's cited in the 2012 Tax Foundation survey in the PowerPoint attached to the materials for tonight. So I guess I'm wondering why we're not being more ambitious on the gross receipts side of things for all those reasons I just laid out.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just keep responding? Okay, thank you, Mr. President. When there's a question, of course. Thank you, Councillor Kane. The hotel portion in particular, the research and the convenings of that was done by the prior administration, and given the short, again, runway that we have, I tried to focus on added pieces that we needed to get from 9 million to 13 million to close that gap. I do appreciate the sentiment. I agree it's time we have some more structural reform conversations around affordability of how we collect local taxes and a more small p progressive taxation policy. Those take structural changes, charter changes, ordinance changes, et cetera, to actually get there. I hear the eagerness for bolder pieces. And again, I offer to folks 1 month to present you a budget is a challenge even in a year with a minimal amount of reworking of a budget. A $13 million gap is significant. It is. So I hear you. I hear that piece. I also I was really working with department heads to try to provide a measured and balanced set of responses, one that spreads the reality across different sectors. That includes property taxpayers and gross receipts. It also acknowledges the unknowns around our downtown, so we don't bank on things that haven't been stabilized yet for community safety, but also tries, again, to do multiple things at once. So this is what we have to offer, and of course, when you start to deliberate, this becomes a collaborative process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kane. We have Councilor Doherty, Newbeezer, Carpenter, and then Bergman. Are there any other councilors that would like to speak on this issue? Okay, we at the moment have about 7 minutes left on this item, but I think it's worth our extending it, so we'll see where we're at, but we'll at least extend it to get through Councilor Bergman. So, Councilor Doherty.
Thanks, President Travers, and I will try to be brief so that everyone has an opportunity. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I also want to thank you, Madam Mayor, and CAO Shad and all the folks that you're working with for the incredible amount of work that I'm sure went into this. It's obvious that it went into it, and the more work that will come. Specifically, and Councilor Kane made reference to this slide, I wanted to thank you for the comparisons on the hotel tax rates for different places in the country. I think that's useful. As I'm sure everyone is concerned generally about Burlington being a competitive place. I think it should be part of all of our conversations and discussions, whether it's on our tax structure, our public safety, our response to climate change. I think it's just an essential component of all these conversations. With that, I would make, I guess I have two respectful requests. One, I think that when we're doing comparisons to other municipalities or regions, the usefulness of those comparisons is a direct function of how comparable the city really is to our own city. So I was pleased to see us comparing ourselves to Portland, Maine. This isn't scientific, but it sort of seems like Portland, Maine is sort of Burlington-ish. I also think it's really important that we have this comparison to Colchester and Williston in here. And I would ask as we go forward that you focus on finding more comparable benchmarks. I, for example, do not think it is particularly useful to see us compared to Boston or Cambridge or Hyannis. I'm not completely convinced that this median number is all that useful either. Those big municipalities, those specialized cities, just have a higher, different profile of tourist draw than Burlington. So my first respectful request is that as we go forward, we have maybe, if possible, more meaningful and thoughtful consideration of what cities we're comparing ourselves to when we're looking at things like the hotel tax rate. Because I think that we run the risk, and I know everyone's cognizant of this, that we are going to cause a softening of our own market by driving business out of town. And this leads into my second request, which is that I'm heartened to hear that you're meeting with the local business community and engaging with them. And when you do so, I hope that the administration and city staff asks our business community what their assessment is on what this tax, this gross receipts tax rate change will do, specifically in things like conventions, for example. Organizers who run conventions look really hard, the bottom line, when they're booking 150, 200, 300 rooms at a pop. There's a big delta between us and South Burlington and Colchester and Williston and Winooski right now. And I think that should be a concern for all of us. There's a significant delta between us and Portland. And I think that that should be a real concern for us in terms of whether this is sustainability, whether this is sustainable rather, or whether this is creating a risk that I think is already really present to our downtown business community. So I would ask that you have that conversation and we can hear more about how that conversation goes in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. We have Councilor Newbeezer to be followed by Carpenter and Bergman. Councilor Newbeezer.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciated the information, and yeah, I'm just thoroughly impressed by the administration and city staff being able to close a $14 million, $13 million gap with months and months and months is probably incredibly difficult, let alone sort of having a timeline of weeks. I knocked every door in Ward 1 3 times, and I think the two things that I heard over and over and over again were do everything you can to slow property tax increase. I'm glad that this budget does. The other piece I heard was we need to take a data-driven approach that takes the politics out of public safety and focuses on modern approaches that are actually effective. And this budget, even with a pretty large gap we're trying to make, seems from the conversation tonight to indicate to me that we're still making significant investments that will set us up for the long term in public safety. So I wanted to applaud that and not let that get lost in the conversation as we continue to talk about this budget. The other piece that's just near and dear to my heart, and I'm really glad to hear, and I was really glad to see the CRT program is going to be preserved for FY25. You know, just so many folks have been suffering immensely, particularly through COVID, and folks have, heard me talk about it before, but I got sober in Burlington, and so many folks, even with literally decades, went back out during COVID, and seeing that impact both on the folks themselves, their families, our community, and the amazing staff in so many different organizations and government trying to address that. Anyway, it's an aside. I know we all agree there, but I really value the CRT program being prioritized. The other piece I would say, I guess I would throw out, I'm personally less concerned. I'll say I come from a family of small business owners. My stepfather, mother, grandfather, father, and many more are small business owners in the town I grew up in, and very civically involved. And so I'll say, like, the impact of any sort of fee increases on businesses isn't lost on me, and on consumers isn't lost on me. And when we talk about getting a hotel room, when we talk about spending $200+ on a meal, there's a very specific segment of the population that can actually spend money in that way. Certainly my family can't spend $200 on a meal downtown unless we have a pretty good reason to right now. And so my point in this is that luxury goods do have a little more elasticity. It's good that it sounds like, and it was going to be one of my questions, but you answered it, that we're going to reevaluate throughout this budget to make sure that that revenue is actually coming in. But we can put more pressure from a tax perspective on luxury goods. If we tax private jets, that's a dream of mine, probably might not get there. If we tax private jets, our billionaire is going to stop making record number of flights to the Burlington airport. I would venture a no. If we increase, I think somebody said $8 to a hotel room, are the thousands of folks primarily coming in to set their kids up at our universities going to notice that $8? Maybe, but I think the risk versus trying to save property taxpayers more financial burden seems sensible to me, and so I appreciated that piece of the budget as well. And I'm sure I'm using up plenty of time here.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Yeah, there was 2 questions I got from constituents around the efficiency studies, which were answered. And so I just wanted to note for folks probably watching that I will be looking to get that information and relay that. Yeah, and look forward to collaborating with everybody on this council, with the administration, with various stakeholders, and certainly, most importantly, my constituents, to figure out how we deal with, to my mind, one of the largest financial crises the city has faced in many years. And I'm glad to be addressing it all collaboratively and productively with everyone here.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. I added 10 minutes to the time that we had allotted to this, and we have Councilors Carpenter and Bergman still on the list here. So Councilor Carpenter will turn to you, then Councilor Bergman.
Thanks. I'll try not to repeat what my colleagues have asked, and some of my questions are sort of in no random order. I had one quickie, which is an amount of money that you're going to ask for pilots. What happens if we don't get it? Because it's voluntary. So if you could answer that. More generally, just an editorial comment about the ARPA funds. I'm glad we have them. I need to say I'm a little frustrated. Twice during this year, for different reasons, we've asked, is there any more ARPA? Is there any more ARPA? Nope, 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 it's all spent. And so that's frustrating. I'm in particular a little frustrated that you're going to take and reallocate Housing Trust Fund. Not a big amount of money, but it's dollars for housing, and we need those desperately. And I'm not thrilled. I understand you're trying to fill the gap, but I'm not thrilled to make that fungible with additional dollars we need for housing. Relative to the CSOs, I understand what you heard from the police department, but at the same time this year, we're looking at things like revisiting our trespass ordinance, our graffiti ordinance. We need staff to help implement that. And so again, I don't want to see us short-ended in whatever staff the police department needs for that. And in particular, at this year, I hear all of the time the frustration around the support staff for the sworn officers. People calling and all they get is a recording. You know, that is not as good as a sworn officer and not as good as a CSO, but it's a still gap in the system. And I think as we look at the community safety needs, customer service has got to be a part of it, and I want to make sure we're budgeting adequately for customer service. Sort of in that same vein, along with some of the other comments, I appreciate why using a vacancy strategy is expeditious versus layoff. And I just challenge us to make sure that if we need to get rid of 20 or 25 positions to plug the gap, that those are the more important. Oftentimes you have vacancies in the tough jobs. The fun jobs, people stick with. And you know, if we had one less of somebody in something, would that part of the 20 get us to a better space? And I just challenge us a little bit to look not just at vacancies, but you know, perhaps a number short of a strategic goal that we might have less folks in. I appreciate, Mayor, your willingness to share the operational study. That will be important. And I would ask that when you do that, it come maybe with a timeline. I suspect it's by departments or by function area, and it would be really helpful for me to understand what, you know, when are we going to tackle those. And I know they're going to be tough because they're going to probably involve merging functions, merging staff, eliminating staff. And so I'm truly concerned about how sensitive that is, but I hope we can put a timeline. And then the one last sort of editorial comment I want to make, I've heard, you know, Councilor Kane and Councilor Newbeezer talk about our need for data, looking at our tax system. And I agree. And actually, several years ago, we passed a resolution that asked us to look at it. The biggest part of our property taxes are the education tax. We do not have great data outside of the city of Burlington. It rests with the state of Vermont. Who gets the homestead credit? Is it being targeted? And I just encourage us, anything we talk about, we need that data. And the main reason I bring it up is that resolution had suggested that we hire a consultant to help us do that data. One of the ways we're able to plug this budget is we had leftover money from the property tax lag study that resulted as reappraisal, and we can explain that another time what that means. But the bottom line is we offered a rebate to people who didn't take it. That may be because we weren't targeting them, we didn't understand their property taxes, they weren't the right income range. We are really short of data on anything moving forward that relates to that. I think that's most of my comments.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter.
Just very briefly on the question parts of it. What happens if we don't collect, it's $40,000. We were trying to shoot for something, but shoot low. That's why, again, I pushed for us to go to more than 13.1 million, so we have a buffer in just the reality check that may or may not work. And looking at that list, there's all sorts of different nonprofits on that list, but then a lot of the folks who own most of the parcels are the big players like UVM Medical Center, et cetera, which is a separate conversation around the MOUs that we have in the fee-for-service. And the only just comment, because I think the other thing you said were just your position, which is totally fair, is just on the customer service piece within the police department in particular. I completely agree. We have a larger conversation around dispatch, I believe we need to have. They've also had challenges hiring. There's been a real roller coaster of dropping in numbers of folks doing actual dispatch work at the police department, you know, all sorts of things I've learned in the last month. And so it is another workforce challenge. And I think part of this is making clear what our expectations are for response, making sure it's clear to the community, and then working really hard to make sure we're able to hire so that people have a higher standard of service when they call and calling back if they're not able to be responded to immediately. So that's both a policy piece as well as a workforce piece.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Bergman.
Thank you. Actually, just comments. First of all, I really appreciate the work that you've done, the sharing that you've done, the thought that you've done. I don't know how anybody could do this in a new administration, no matter who would have been elected in this period of time. So I just want to say that we need to, and the people need to cut this administration some slack. Any new administration some slack. It's also ironic what I'm hearing, because we inherited a whole bunch of the stuff that now I'm hearing criticisms from the former administration, and that's not even to say including the deficit. So the hotel property tax, the hotel increase, that was proposed a long time ago, and I didn't hear any of these objections then. I totally appreciate the flexibility that this new administration has had, particularly on the gross receipts tax. It was not in your original thinking. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's based on an ability to pay as opposed to a flat regressive property tax. You know, we have been fighting this fight. I have been fighting this fight. Some of you were here. Sarah was clearly here since Bernie raised the frontal attack on regressive property taxes. And that information on the hotel gross receipts tax was part of the original submissions that we got in the winter with the old administration, including the comps. And when I look at the comps that you have provided around the gross receipts on meals for the area, I find us to be very competitive. I totally support us looking at competitiveness, but so far what I see does not scare me at all away from particularly 0.5% on that. I appreciate the call that I hear for frugality, but I have said this here before, that austerity is not a solution. We just need to raise the monies that we need from those people who have the ability to pay. And I haven't heard in the 2+ years I've been elected to this council in the 20 years before that, that I served in 3 administrations, that we are overstaffed in any of the departments. I hear the calls to cut the grass less. I can tell you that, at least like in Roosevelt Park, we're not cutting the grass often there. And so if it's going to get awful high for those kids in the Center City Little League to be playing if they don't cut that grass as well as they were doing right now. Let me just end by agreeing with Councillor McKnight in saying that I want to look also at the big picture, and what I have heard is a commitment to do that, and an earlier development in the budget for next year. I appreciate that. I think it is way unrealistic in this transition period to have expected that, but I really do look forward to a real good look at things, including the way that we raise revenues. And thank you very much for the effort that you've put in so far and that you'll continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bergman. We've gone well over time here, but Councillor Kane and Grant, you can be very brief, like 30 seconds or so.
Okay, thank you. I'll be super brief. Just in terms of the stability of the revenues from like the hotel tax, gross receipts tax, I think that'll be fine. We have a shortage. The City Place project is being turned into a hotel in part. The Memorial Block, Eric Farrell's pitching that also potentially as a hotel. We also, I think, should be comparing ourselves to cities like Boston and not to suburbs like, Colchester, Williston. I've never met somebody who wanted to visit Burlington and was considering staying in a hotel or Airbnb outside of the city of Burlington. Nobody I know has ever considered that on a trip here. So I don't think it's appropriate. Just like in Boston, right? People want to be in Boston proper. People come here and they want to be in Burlington proper. So I think that is a much more appropriate point of comparison. People don't want to be, in Colchester or Williston.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Councillor Grant, and then because it is a working session, the City Council President can actually say something, so I'm going to, I may take some liberty there as well. So, and I'll have the last word, or you can have the last word, Mayor, too. So, Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I know I'm sounding like a broken record. I am. And I'm sorry that I couldn't make people understand before. We cannot make police officers and CSOs appear out of nowhere. Nobody wants to have the hard conversations about when we do recruit people, we do get them to come here, and then they leave. There's something going on, and we have to be willing to look at that and say, how can we be innovative? How can we think outside the box? And what do we do to address a culture or environment that is not supporting fully our new hires? So you could say all day, we need more officers, but it does not make sense to budget more than what we can hire. It just doesn't make sense. We know, even from the leadership, what they expect to be able to hire. It doesn't mean that we're getting rid of the cap. Ideally, in the next 2 years, or sooner rather than later, we can get there. So I do really want you to think about that, because it really doesn't mean anything to say we need more officers, because quite frankly, everybody knows that. It's about why we're not holding on to who we get. And I'll just quickly say I do agree with the city comparisons, because when we take a look about where people want to visit in New England, these other cities do compete with Burlington, and I think Burlington competes with them, with Boston, with Portland, with Cambridge, certainly the two listed in Rhode Island. It's very common for people wanting to visit both places, and I think appropriate to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. If I may just take a little bit of liberty here. The first is an ask, which is I really appreciate the fact that your presentations on the general fund have included really sort of the all-in cost to the general fund, including retirement and debt service. I think it may be helpful as we move into the next month, though, for taxpayers to understand what that all-in cost means for them. We've generated those reports before when we've looked at things on a piecemeal basis, like the high school bond or the public safety tax increase, for example. But even though items like the retirement costs and debt service are out of our control to a certain extent, I think it would be helpful for taxpayers to understand what the tax increases do mean for them going forward. And I regret putting that ask on top of everything you've already been doing, because let me echo the thanks again of everyone here for all the work you put into this. I agree that the timeline here is asking a lot of a new administration, and I'm glad that we're already looking towards FY26, and I would suggest that if it's at all possible that in doing that, we perhaps consider a change to the start of our fiscal year, because there will be future new administrations, and the crunch between April 1 and July 1 is a pretty significant crunch. And of course, I don't know if that's mandated by state statute that we have to be on July 1, but something to consider here. There is just one other thing that I wanted to say, though, which is just in reference to our use of the term sort of budget gap or budget deficit. As I've been thinking about this more, from my perspective, the use of that term, a budget gap or a budget deficit, would make more sense if we had gotten to the end here of FY24 and didn't have enough money to pay the bills. And that's not the case. I think we can all agree here that the financial health of the city is strong. We're being presented here with a general fund budget of $107.8 million. This is $7 million more than the budget in FY24. And again, while I understand the time crunch and appreciate the willingness to think bigger about the budget, and also understand that many of the costs in this budget are outside of our control, a budget is ultimately the mayor's and then the city council's choice. And any budget gap or budget deficit that exists is ultimately a gap or a deficit of our own creation. And it's a gap or a deficit that is going to require asking more of Burlington taxpayers. And from my perspective, the trajectory that we're on right now in what we're asking of Burlington taxpayers is not sustainable. Looking back historically, 10 years ago, our general fund budget was $62.9 million. 5 years ago, it was $79 million. And obviously, a lot has happened over the last 5 years. But moving to $107.8 million, and of course, the school budget, which is the other half of taxpayers' bills, they're now at $104 million, and I would say the same thing to the school district, that the trajectory that we're on right now is not sustainable. So I'm glad to hear the commitment and the voices of folks around this table to think about the bigger picture over the coming year, to think creatively, but I think it's also going to require some tough decisions as we get towards FY26. I'm hopeful that we're going to have the courage to make those decisions, not just for Burlington taxpayers, but I also think when we think about the gross receipts tax here that we need to be thinking about that and would actually encourage a sunset not just on the gross receipts tax for restaurants and bars, but a sunset on the gross receipts tax for hotels as well, and that we make a commitment to both our residents here and to our businesses here that we are going to be thinking big, that we are going to be thinking creatively, and that we are going to consider tough decisions here over the next year. I hear what folks are saying about comparing to Boston and to Newport, and I hear the different viewpoints on that, but Burlington and Rutland are the only two cities in the state that are allowed to charge a gross receipts tax. Every other municipality in the state is limited to a 1% add-on to the state tax that already exists here. And as it is already, it costs 1% more to go out to a restaurant or to a bar here in Burlington as opposed to South Burlington. It already costs 1% more for you to stay at a hotel here in Burlington. And again, just as the tax bills for residents here, I think continuing to increase the gross receipts tax for hotel goers, paying 3% more here in Burlington than they would in South Burlington, paying 1.5% more to go out to a restaurant here, is also not sustainable. And I understand if you're looking at it individually, at a single person or a single family, getting a hotel room, that sounds okay. But a lot of the drivers of the local economy here is not just that single family coming here to get a hotel room. It's that wedding that's blocking off a bunch of rooms in a hotel. It's that business conference that's deciding to bring thousands of people here to our community. And I do think that when they're blocking 100 rooms at a hotel here for a conference, the difference between a 4% tax at the Hilton on Lakeside and a 1% extra tax at the Doubletree in South Burlington is likely going to make a difference. And so I think we need to think creatively. I think we need to think carefully, and would suggest that if we do need to, over the course of this next year, include some increases, that we consider sunsets on those as well. I probably went over 5 minutes, so thank you very much for that. And thank you to councilors for their presentations this evening. Anything further from you, Mayor?
I'll just say, Councilor Travers, I agree with a lot of what you said. Just back to the first point about the impact on taxpayers. When I first presented this, I committed to making sure that it's a big piece of the end of this work, to make sure that we have that very understandable, transparent, and easy to understand summary of what the impact on taxpayers will be. That will include both the rates of our 2 utilities, so folks have a full understanding of the local impact. And that not only will be a commitment this year, but that's an area the city can really grow and improve upon in terms of people understanding how we're spending their money and why. And July 2nd, that's when we're going to start fiscal year 26, so get excited. And just on a final note, because I think this is also important in everything that we do, we live in a very special place. And as someone who grew up in Central Vermont, Burlington attracted me. It has kept me as a young person in this state. We have a lot of work to do, but we have a lot to be proud of, and we can't forget how much vibrancy there is here that does attract people to be here, to locate their weddings and all of that. So not to debate it at all, but I want us to also feel the pride, because if we exude that as leaders of the city, that is a helpful and important piece of this, as much as it is getting to the root causes of what we're really struggling with at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So we will close agenda item 8 and now move to our deliberative agenda. The first item on our deliberative agenda is 9.1, the recommended action on 9.1 regarding an outdoor entertainment permit for Orlando's at 1 Lawson Lane is to approve the 2024-25 outdoor entertainment permit renewal with the following change: Friday and Saturday only, end time 11:30 p.m. with all standard conditions. Any councilor willing to make a motion on that recommended action? Councilor Shannon, is there a second to that motion?
No.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Yes, I'd ask for the floor back after a second.
Okay,
Let's go
and
ahead.
you asked for the floor back upon a second, yeah. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Councilor Shannon, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I voted against this in committee. I don't know if they are here tonight to speak to this. If we can give them. Are they online?
He had a family event. He was logged in earlier.
Okay, well, I'll start, and if they come back, then they can speak to this. This is an establishment. I want to say that I really appreciate our local bars and clubs and the vibrancy that they add to our community, and I want to be supportive of them. But when we have an establishment that has been somewhat of a chronic problem to this council, I'm not inclined to give them longer hours. I like to see a record that they have, that they're being good community members, being responsive to community complaints. And in this case, they were better after the last incident. We haven't had an incident for a bit. But at the first license committee, they did not attend, where they're asking for longer hours, they did not attend the meeting. And I think, again, this is somewhat of a demonstration of how this establishment has treated this council. They argued that they needed more time so that when the bands are booked typically 3 hours from 8 to 11, and if band goes over a little bit, they have been reprimanded by us for that. They needed some leeway. For that, they asked to go to 11:30. I was willing to go to 11:15. The committee decided to go with 11:30, and I don't really want to split hairs here. That isn't the point. But I wanted the opportunity here at least to raise the concern that this is not an establishment that has a history of working well with us, doesn't even show up when they're asking for additional privileges, and I remain hesitant on this. I didn't want the council to simply approve this on a consent agenda, and I hope that the council is supportive of that position in sending a message that we are watching, that we're going to hold them accountable, and that being disruptive, I understand that there are many establishments in this city that have later hours, but I also think that we should be responsive. We established a policy long ago that we would give more flexibility to establishments who weren't causing problems with neighbors. And so we need to see that record. We had asked quite a while back for soundproofing. That never happened. They did change the positioning of the stage. That's made improvements for the neighbors. We don't have complaints currently. So I wanted the council to have that information. I hope that if we go forward with the additional 30 minutes on Friday and Saturday nights, that there's an expectation that it's not going to have continued creep. This is what we were told that they need to assure that they will be able to abide by the rules that we have given them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. I think we probably could go to a vote on this now unless any councilor wants to be heard on this. 3, 4 councilors, okay. All right, Councilor Grant, Newbeezer, Barlow, and Kane.
I'm really upset because a number of things have just been misrepresented. Yes, it is true that this bar had a number of complaints, and there were some issues with the responsiveness. They ended up having a 2-week suspension on their outdoor license. There was an unjustifiable attempt to shut them down completely for 2 weeks. And that motion was not seconded, but because it was an action that was not, it was overly punitive and not actually warranted. Shortly after becoming city councilor, since this particular bar is in the Central District, I started interacting with them. I actually had communication with them and other residents, and was kept informed about some of the things that they were working on in terms of addressing sound remediation. I had that conversation with them. Hey, this was something you're supposed to follow up on. Apparently you didn't. And they did, and we really addressed the issue for one particular resident whose apartment was located at the former location of, right behind the former location of the stage, and they've addressed that as well as also moving their speakers. I would really say there's been a little bit of an abuse of power here.
I'm sorry, Councilor Grant, I'm sorry, we're not going to impugn
Sure.
individual
So,
motives.
I will just state what happened. Our priority response team from our police department says that noise complaints are a priority 3. A priority 3. We had a city councilor who called the police
Councilor
on
Grant,
them.
I'm sorry.
But that,
we're not
hold
going
on,
to-
that is
No,
something
it's
that
not a hold on,
happened.
it's not a
That
hold on. We're
happened,
not
and
going to
that is
impugn-
part of the issue here. That happened.
Councilor Grant,
It was
I
not
apologize.
appropriate.
Councilor Grant, we're not going to impugn individual councilors' motives here. If you want to speak to the merits of the motion, you may continue.
Certainly. This bar is trying to be competitive with the other businesses around them, all of which have later times, except for some of the restaurants. This bar is trying to survive This bar has the same issues of public safety related to other bars, where if people are shooting up on their patios, they don't get a response. This bar has a business model where they're trying to get 3 hours in from 8 to 11 for their bands. That's the peak time on the weekends for them to have an opportunity to make money, for their staff to have an opportunity to make money, and for the bands to have an opportunity to make money. And I believe this bar needs to be treated fairly. And their aim would be to make sure that everything is done no later than 11:15. They are not asking for additional time during the weekdays. They are only asking for time on Friday and Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Councilor Newbeezer, to be followed by Councilors Barlow and Kane.
Thank you. I certainly don't have as much context as folks on the committee, and I certainly appreciate that the need to strike a balance between noise for folks living near downtown, particularly bars, etc., and the need to make sure that we are doing our best, and certainly folks are imperfect. I'm a new counselor, so I don't have all the context of this particular business in front of us over the years, but certainly want to express my desire, I guess, as a member of this council, that we are doing our best to work collaboratively with our businesses downtown and supporting them. I do want to note, because I think it's relevant to the conversation we just had for the past hour on the budget, what we're discussing is there's a community need, and it's city government's role to work in a collaborative manner with our partners across the city to solve that community need. And that may come with additional financial cost to those businesses. I think someone just referenced an ask that they soundproof walls. So I think in principle, I want to note that I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good discussion to be having, and that we need to continue to model that moving forward. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Councilor Barlow?
Thank you, President Travers. I also support, and I think we should have a more level playing field for businesses downtown with regard to outdoor entertainment hours. And so I do support this. I do remember that when Orlando's was before us last year, they did make representations that they would install soundproofing, and I don't know if that came up during the License Committee's review of this request. In as much as it didn't, I guess I would ask, we should ask Orlando's to make good on that. So that's the only thing that I would say is, like, I'm supportive. I would just like them to do the things that they said they would do when they were here last.
They did talk about the movement of the stage, the movement of the speakers. This is the outdoor permit. So with regards to what they do with who they book for bands, as well as American Flatbread, which also, doesn't book bands as much, but like, say, during Jazz Festival week, they'll both be booking extra bands. They also have software that they put in that creates an alarm at the soundboard, so
Point of
that
order.
the...
Yeah, I mean, Councilor Barlow, were you asking a question of the committee?
It was discussed. I just
Grant
want to
was
say that it was
recognized.
discussed.
Okay. Thank you. I guess I would just add, I echo Councilor Newbeezer's comments that we might have asks of our businesses, like the soundproofing, that may be additional burdens on them, but that would allow them to coexist more peacefully with their neighbors. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councilor Kane, and then hopefully we can go to a vote.
Thank you. And yeah, I agree that the bar should be doing what they said they would do. And I know there are other aspects of the concerns, including like propping doors open. There are different times permitted for indoor and outdoor music. I think it would be a good idea if the bar came before the license committee, say around Labor Day or after a certain period of time before too long, just to check in. I don't know if we could make that part of the motion. I am also concerned with making changes to the time that bars can play music right next to residential buildings. In particular, like I believe income stabilized like public housing. People are not very mobile. You choose to maybe live in a certain spot, and then you're counting on some consistency, I think, in terms of the policies that affect your ability to sleep. So I am concerned. I think it's an equity issue. At the same time, though, am not well versed in the particular rules around playing music. I have heard that there are inconsistencies in terms of how late bars can play, and that this is a relatively early time to begin with, and that the request is still relatively early compared to other bars. So I'm a little bit confused why there isn't more uniformity or maybe complete uniformity in the downtown core as to indoor and outdoor hours for playing music. And yeah, I don't know, I think, enough about the situation overall to feel strongly one way or another. I would hate to be, like the deciding vote on an issue like this. That's the way I'm feeling right now. But I just wanted to make sure those issues are raised. That the particular people who are living next door, the bar potentially coming back before the license committee within a couple of months, and consistency with the time that bars can play music in the downtown core. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kane. Seeing no other councilors in the queue, we will go to a vote. The motion is to approve the permit. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Carries unanimously. Thank you. We now move to item 9.2, a resolution honoring Burlingtonian Marcel Beaudin. And Councilor Shannon, could I turn to you for this?
Thank you, President Travers. I just need to get up the resolution, sorry. So I had the great privilege of being at the very first meeting when Marcel Beaudin gathered many sailors in this community to launch the idea of a community sailing center, which was, at the time, really a completely foreign idea. And his vision for getting people involved in sailing who had never had the opportunity, and to provide not only equity to the shore, equity and access to the shores of Lake Champlain, but actually getting people out on the water, was visionary. And there were so many obstacles along the way to achieving this goal, starting with the fact that it was such a new idea, and it has become a model across this country for community sailing centers, which are much more common today than at the time when Marcel envisioned this. So if you wouldn't mind, President Travers, I would like to read this resolution. That's okay?
Please, yes.
Thank you. That whereas Marcel Beaudin was an influential Vermont architect of modern design and resident of the city of Burlington for much of his life, and whereas Marcel was a dedicated member of the Burlington Planning Commission, helping shape the development and landscape of Burlington and its world-class publicly accessible waterfront, and whereas Marcel was a staunch advocate for access to and recreational opportunities on the waterfront and Lake Champlain, with a particular passion for sailing as a medium to celebrate and experience Lake Champlain. And whereas Marcel received a vision for innovative places Marcel conceived a vision for innovative places and spaces to ensure public access to the waterfront and Lake Champlain, and inspired the community to develop and support those spaces. And whereas Marcel designed the waterfront Burlington Community Boathouse in 1988 as a reflection of the 1887 Historic Yacht Club there, with his form follows function, contemporary style, for a public building on a floating barge. And whereas Marcel's legacy contribution to the city of Burlington and state of Vermont is the 1993 co-founding of the Lake Champlain Community Sailing Center, a nationally award-winning organization providing access, education, and recreational opportunities for everyone regardless of age, ability, or income. Lake Access, Life Lessons for All. And whereas Marcel designed the new Lake Champlain Community Sailing Center building and waterfront access infrastructure, including universal access docks, ramps, paths, and amenities in the only net positive energy community waterfront facility in the country. And whereas to the end of his time, Marcel incessantly sketched innovations and solved for design problems for over 1,000 architectural projects, including the preservation and restoration of the lost mural from the Chi Adam Ohavi Zedek Synagogue as an important remnant of Burlington's rich history of Eastern European settlement. And whereas Marcel sailed off into the Lake Champlain sunset on March 29th, 2024, passing away at the age of 95 years and 11 days. And whereas the city of Burlington and state of Vermont are forever changed and improved by Marcel's innovative design contributions to the landscape and communities surrounding Lake Champlain. Now therefore be it resolved that the Burlington City Council respectfully requests the life of Marcel Beaudin and his many contributions to Burlington be celebrated in a mayoral proclamation that Friday, August 2nd, 2024, be declared Marcel Beaudin Day. The Burlington City Council encourages all residents to honor Marcel Beaudin and his contributions to integrating Vermont's built human landscape into its remarkable natural environment. And I'd like to thank the mayor's office for their support and cooperation in bringing forward this resolution, as well as Kate Neubauer, who was here earlier, and Mark Nod from the Community Sailing Center, who authored this beautiful resolution, and to thank Marcel for his great contributions to our community. Thank you to all of the counselors at the table who have supported this and hopefully will vote for this tonight. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Shannon, for very much for your work on this resolution. I will take that as a motion to adopt the resolution with a second from Councilor Bergman. And yes, Councilor Bergman.
I'm very happy to have been asked to support this. I was on the Waterfront Committee when we approved the boathouse in 1988, and I thought and continue to think that the design was and is perfect in its simplicity and its honoring of our past. My son Woody did a summer camp at the sailing center for one summer, and it exposed him to things that he never would have been exposed to in my house. The video that we saw last year about the center's equity initiatives was really inspiring, and so it is very fitting that we honor Marcel in this way. But it's not only about a man's life work, but our own initiatives to create a waterfront for all and not just a wealthy few, as is in the case of most of the country. It shows that another way is possible, and Marcel made it happen here. And thank you, Joan, for putting this forward.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Any other councilors wish to speak to the motion? Councilor McKnight?
I'll be very brief. I just wanted to thank you and the others who have spoken here for the opportunity to learn about this great man, because I had never heard of him before, and my children attend camp at the sailing center, and echoing Councilor Bergman's comments on just this very special nature of that place and the access that it provides to something that is usually out of reach. I really appreciate the opportunity to learn about this history and share it with hopefully our audience watching online and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McKnight. Does anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Councilor Newbeezer.
I'll be really quick. I just can't miss an opportunity to say thank you and appreciate your leadership on it, Councilor Shannon.
Thank you. With no other councilors in the queue, we'll go to a vote. All in favor of adopting the resolution honoring Burlingtonian Marcel Beaudin, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously, and again, thank you very much for your work on this, Councilor Shannon. That brings us to the last item on our deliberative agenda, 9.3, which is a resolution, a building emissions reduction ordinance. And for a motion here, I will turn to Councilor Broderick.
Thank you. I would motion to waive the reading and adopt the proposed resolution referring a proposal for a building emissions reduction ordinance to the Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee and establishing a proposed timeline for adoption of the ordinance, and I'd like the floor back after a second.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. Second by Councilor Bergman. The floor is yours, Councilor Broderick.
Thank you. So this resolution aims to plug major gaps in our building decarbonization work, which builds off of policies such as rental weatherization and our carbon impact fee to address the second highest polluter in the city of Burlington, our building emissions. Here, the TUC would be tasked to create a building emissions reduction ordinance applying to existing buildings 25,000 square feet and above, excluding buildings which are already under the purview of the previously stated policies. That was born out of a desire to not have to go into previous ordinances and amend them, just purely plugging gaps here. The TUC would solicit input from relevant parties such as climate advocacy groups, building owners, BED and DPI, relevant labor unions, and more. And a working draft of the ordinance that would come out of TUC would be referred to the Ordinance Committee by the final council meeting in October 2024. We have long been out of time to talk about and study the merits of swift, decisive climate action. Instead, we must commit to doing that work to reach our net zero goals, which, as we all know, we're not hitting right now. And as you heard from this public forum and many, many public forums before, Burlingtonians agree with this sentiment. Therefore, I would urge the council to pass this resolution as is, empowering the multi-partisan TUC to work together with our community on climate policy that works for this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. I had next up in my queue, we'll go to Councilor Newbeezer and then we'll go to Councilor Barlow.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to the councilors who are bringing forth this resolution. As I'll probably talk about too much throughout the next 2 years, I've spent years and years, and it's my day job working on the issue of the climate crisis and trying to reduce emissions as quickly as possible, but not just as quickly as possible because I'm a young environmentalist, as quickly as possible because that is what the scientists are telling us we must do, as quickly as possible because here on the local level, we have seen devastation, whether it's the Intervale, not to mention communities across the state in the past year and two. We've seen our lake. We were talking about tourism dollars and making sure that those stay as stable revenues for our downtown businesses and for the city coffers. Our lake is increasingly and will continue to become increasingly unusable, not only for tourists, but more importantly, for families across the city. So just to underscore the urgency, which I know, or at least I've heard from counselors across the table, or every counselor at the table, I should say, both on the campaign trail and certainly in conversations I've had with folks. I also just want to say, as someone who got involved at UVM and heard so many folks express concern sometimes about students' involvement in local government, I'll just say having a representative of students on this council and the thoughtfulness and the just such well thought out nature and an attempt to really have this conversation in a bipartisan way, put it into a committee where there's 2 votes on either side and we've got to come to some agreement if something's going to move out. I've just been incredibly grateful to Councilor Broderick. And so I just wanted to name that because, little known fact, I ran for Ward 8 when I was 19, maybe a good thing for the city. I didn't win at that point in my life, but certainly if there was ever a question as to the importance of students, and more particularly and broadly, young people getting involved in our political process, this is example A of what we can do together when we do. And then I'm sure I'm taking up more time than I need to. So I won't. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Councilor Barlow.
Thank you, President Travers. I want to also thank Councilor Broderick for bringing this forward, and I am supportive, but not in the exact form that you brought it forward in. So I would move to amend and replace the language in the posted document with the posted document named 2024 Resolution Relating to a Building Emissions Reduction Ordinance, Final Amendment, and ask for the floor back after a second.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Barlow. There is a proposed amendment that is posted to Civic Clerk, as Councilor Barlow noted, labeled as final amendment. The motion is to amend the underlying resolution as set forth in that posted amendment. Is there a second to Councilor Barlow's motion? Second by Councilor Litwin. Councilor Barlow, do you wish for the floor back?
I do. I do. So first, this amendment does not substantively change the outcome of the resolution, which is to set up a path by which 2 can draft an ordinance by the end of October. It is true that it doesn't presuppose an outcome. The committee doesn't know what the outcome will be because we haven't done the work yet. The argument that we have replaced the action with a study is just false. We are not delaying or skirting actions. We're not slowing it down. We're not undermining the work of the underlying resolution. The amendment does add a step that was overlooked and missing from the original resolution, at least in my view. The work we have to do to see what other communities are doing with respect to a building's emission reduction ordinance, and to consider what may or may not apply to our particular circumstances and existing policy framework in Burlington. The amendment also provides further guidance as to what should be considered, including but not limited to feedback from city staff who will be tasked with enforcing this ordinance, and who unfortunately were not consulted when the original resolution was drafted. And lastly, the amended resolution provides a path for a stronger buildings emission reduction ordinance, in that it does not require exemptions for buildings already subject to the carbon pollution impact fee or the rental weatherization ordinances. And it doesn't require any minimum size limits on buildings. So I'm hoping that this is a friendly amendment and that everyone on the council can support the amended version. Thank you.
I don't know that we have gone through the amendment process with some of our new councilors yet, so the City Council does entertain friendly amendments where if the original maker of the motion and the individual who seconds it are in agreement with the amendment, then they are friendly to it and the amendment is adopted. So Councilor Barlow has presented a question as to whether or not the maker of the original motion is friendly to the amendment. So Councilor Broderick, I will turn to you.
No, I'm not friendly to it, but I do appreciate this amendment. Councilor Barlow, am I allowed to speak to it?
Sure. Let me just, Councilor Barlow, are you done?
I am done for now.
Okay, so yes, Councilor Broderick, I will turn to you next.
Great, thank you. So I actually had a lot more written about the amendment, but I guess I'll break it down a little bit more because I do agree with a lot that this amendment has to offer, outlining a much more detailed process on how we go about this and soliciting more input from certain parties that are going to be affected by any ordinance that we set up here. And in addition, I am also in favor of removing the kind of restrictions and the exemptions. I think it allows us to be more creative and do something better. And the one thing that is kind of a red line for me right now is just changing it from the TOOC drafting a building emissions reduction ordinance to talking about whether we should enact a building emissions reduction ordinance. I believe fully that we need to take direct action now, and Burlington has made strong strides towards decarbonization, but as I've said before, it's not enough, and time is truly of the essence right now. I am aware that the deadline is still there to bring something forward, but it is a deadline. I want to be working hard and fast on something like this while soliciting advice from our entire community. And honestly, a lot of what I was going to respond with was said throughout the public forum by fellow Burlingtonians. And I guess all that being said, I want this resolution to pass. I want to collaborate with my fellow TOOC members and with the community, with our city departments on building strong climate action, but I want that to have a concrete goal and have a direct ask of a committee to get to work on a specific ordinance. And because of that, following deliberation on the amendment, I'm going to motion to divide the question by removing just line 50 to 52 into one separate group and leaving the rest of the amendments in a second group. I'm sorry, President Travers, my message to you was wrong. It was just that first one.
It's okay, understood.
Thank you.
Appreciate the heads up. Any other councilors wish to speak to the amendment?
Me.
Councilor Bergman, and then Councilor Newbeezer.
Just point of information, are we speaking to the amendment, or are we speaking to split the question? Or are we gonna do that
When we
later?
call the vote, that is when a motion to divide the question would be in order. When that motion is made, that is not debatable. So we are currently in debate on the motion as made by Councilor Barlow.
Thank you.
Councilor Bergman.
Thank you, President Travers. I really appreciate the work that we've done in the TOOC, and I totally appreciate the way that we've started this session with 4 of us, which is really unique and is hard. We've got a huge list of items, and a number of them are directly on point. So this is exactly in our wheelhouse. I am not in favor of a number of the proposed changes. We had a debate last meeting related to whereas changes. I've got issues with the changes to the whereas clauses, but like I said last week, and you know, at the end of the day, those are not what we're talking about. We're talking about the resolve clauses. I would just say that the amendments in the whereases related on lines 38 through 44, which really do talk about the elimination of the metric, the 19%, I believe is wrong-headed, because I believe that we really do need to look at the hill that we've got to climb. And we've gone 19%, and we got a long way to go in a short period of time. That being said, I agree with my fellow councilor and the sponsor related to the problems with lines 49 through 52. I think that mere consideration, and that's what it says. It may not be the intent, but mere consideration is woefully inadequate, woefully insignificant. I would also just say, and this is where I divide from Councilor Broderick, is I think that listing in lines 53 through 57, that these are the changes, the amendment lines, that listing the supposed impediments without listing the imperatives, the baseline of support for the changes in state law, the changes in state law, the crisis itself, is just, I mean, I hate to be like as blunt, but you know I am. Is it mainstream politics that gives cover to doing nothing or doing too little? And so I'm concerned about that. And I am also concerned about the deletion of the group of buildings, the 25,000 and over, without there being an alternative. Like Councillor Broderick, I am in favor of the amendment in lines 70 through 73 because it's not a full exemption, and lines 74 through 77 because they just states what the charter is saying, and of course the consultation with BED and permitting and inspections, because we will have to do that. That's in lines 78 through 73. So I think actually, although I would have divided the question a little bit differently than Councillor Broderick, I am appreciative of at least separating out the resolved around consideration versus the actual drafting of an ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bergman. Any other councillors wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Newbeezer and Councillors McKnight and Carpenter.
Yeah, I appreciate the amendment. I'm having read through this weekend and just thinking about it, I'm open to a lot of them. I think some of them are just different ways of saying the exact same thing, personally. I guess I would disagree to a sense, just to, at least my read of this resolution, when we talked about sort of making sure that there's not overlapping programs and that we're sort of taking into existence or taking into consideration existing policy like the rental weatherization and buildings 50,000 square feet and over. The first draft of this acknowledges and takes that into account. I mean, we basically say it in a different way, which I'm happy to do, and so I'm open to those pieces. And then I think the other sort of substantial thing here is the 25K. I don't love taking that out without placing an alternative, because I want, if any working group, if we give someone a purpose to go develop something, let's give some parameter, and I think that's a key parameter, personally. And then the other piece was, certainly the consideration versus you're tasked with doing X. Because we say we're tasked with doing X does not mean that magically it's going to move out of TUC without a majority of TUC voting for it. So to my mind, it's it just, there's no question that we have to reduce our building emissions, that we have to decarbonize. I mean, anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's the position of anybody at this table. And we have 6 years, and we're woefully behind schedule according to our own data. And then that's my final point, which is just the whereas clauses. Again, if it's going to move this forward in a productive manner and encourage collaboration, I'm happy to. But some of these whereas clauses simply sort of, to my mind, decrease the urgency around the framing of the whereases. And if we need to do that to get everybody to a yes, great. I'm happy to do that, but I do think in the whereas clauses, a reason for this resolution, it's completely pertinent to talk about the net zero roadmap and where we are on that roadmap and where we need to go in a very short period of time. So anyway, I'm hoping we can get there tonight and just pass something unanimous, and also don't want to sacrifice urgency, don't want to mislead the public into thinking that we're doing better than we are. Not that I'm saying that's anybody's intent, but how we frame these resolutions matters.
Thank you, Councillor Newbeezer. Councillor McKnight?
Thank you, President Travers. I also want to echo Councillor Newbeezer's comments on appreciation for Councillor Broderick and all your work on this. I often tell people that I think it's really cool that we have college students on our city council here in Burlington, and I think this is a great example of why. So really appreciate that. I want to address a theme, Councillor Barlow touched on this a bit, but from the public comments, I was very confused by a lot of those public comments. The comments seem to be putting forth that Councillor Barlow's amendment delays action, and this is not about doing this amendment is, of which I am supportive, is not about doing a study, is not about punting. both Councilor Broderick's first version of the resolution and the amendment, send it to the committee where more work is needed. I'm personally supportive of Councilor Barlow's version because I think it's really important to consult with the departments that are doing this work to really make sure we're incorporating things in a holistic way that implement what's going on, already at the state level, and just that this is important policy. I want to make sure it's feasible. And to me, it's not about a delay, it's about collaboration and getting it right. And then, to maybe clear up some expectations around this, and perhaps to give some more confidence, I'll say to all my colleagues on TUC, it's my understanding and my expectation that this will be worked on in good faith, that it will be moved forward, that it won't be mere consideration, that we're not kicking the can down the road. I agree we need real action. It needs to happen quickly. And I actually read this amendment as giving us the option to perhaps even go further and include more in our purview than in the first drafts. And, I can say in my conversations one-on-one with folks, everyone has expressed that that is their intent, and I will be following up and checking in with all of my colleagues. So thank you, and I look forward to more on this.
Point of information.
Yep.
I just want to make sure I'm being clear, because I agree with everything, and I feel like maybe I'm not reading this correctly. Line 78 to 85 in the original resolution, doesn't that list all these different stakeholders we're describing? Like, am I reading something different as to need to change that language?
Can I answer my interpretation of where my thought came from?
Well, sure. I don't know that it was appropriately put forward as a point of information that was more, I think, to the debate of the matter, but you still have the floor, Councilor McKnight, so if you want to speak to that.
I was thinking more about the process of the writing of the resolution and the lack of consultation with the departments in the writing of the resolution ahead of time, not what would happen after this potentially goes to TUC.
Okay. So Councilor Carpenter has the floor next. Councilor Newbeezer, if you, for whatever reason, would like to respond to that, then you can have the floor after that. Councilor Carpenter.
Thanks. I agree with Councilor McKnight, and I just want to make kind of a couple comments, because I really am supportive of this. I think the amendment offered gets us to a better place because it actually opens up some opportunities. I have been involved with some of this, particularly on the disclosure side, for more than 10 years. Many of the communities that have adopted this have been a building emissions reduction and disclosure ordinance. And personally, we failed a lot on the disclosure ordinance. There's talk about all these studies. The State of Vermont Public Service Board had a huge study. They presented to the legislature, and the legislature didn't act, and that was in part because of COVID. The Vermont Green Building Network had other proposed legislation, and we didn't act. And so there's no reference to the studies, and I just think we need to look at that. I personally hope this can be broader on the disclosure end. I don't want to leave out small apartment buildings. 25,000 square feet leaves out a lot of small apartment buildings, and that's a huge target group that we need to get to. So I want us to take the time, not slow down the time, take the time, if we're going to do this, to be encompassing. It's actually interesting, and I maybe should have let out with this, that both resolutions and the amended resolution presume we all know what a building emissions reduction ordinance is. And I've looked at a lot of them, and it's not even defined in the resolution, which is something that we need to do. What is it that we're going to ask TUC to do? Explain what it is. So that was my long-winded way of saying I think the amendment gives us more flexibility, and certainly looking at disclosure, to whom it might apply, and clarifies what the committee itself ought to look at, and doesn't presume that we're going to, for instance, automatically adopt the one that Boston just adopted or the one that Cambridge just adopted. Cambridge does include small apartment buildings. This wouldn't. So I think the amendment allows us the time, or not the time, the process, to really get the feedback we need to make it a really good ordinance.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Councilor Newbeezer?
Yeah, I appreciate a lot of that. I guess two things. One, I hear, which is a completely reasonable one, and certainly one I share, that we want to make sure that all stakeholders are at the table and that we're thoughtful in developing policy, whether it's city departments, whether it's organizations in the community, et cetera. Putting that work burden, like this resolution doesn't say, this is the outcome, this is the thing. It says we want to set up a container to actually do this work and explicitly requires that the TOOC does that stakeholder consideration. So I guess I'm just, yeah, that piece I'm still like, it feels like this is explicitly saying, let's have a good process, and we're putting it into a committee that will force some sort of consensus bipartisan outcome, is one piece. The other piece, and I get passionate when I'm talking about climate, so all these are genuine questions, I just want to be clear. I don't see in the amendments, like when we talked about properly defining Barrow, I don't see in the amendments that is defined, unless I'm wrong, which is very possible. So my point being that that's a perfectly fair point, and this amendment doesn't do that. And then the final thing is, there's something else, and it's 10:12, so my brain is falling quickly. Yeah, it's like some of these are very legitimate points, but they don't match the amended language, is my point, I guess. Like when we're talking about defining Barrow, it's not in the amendment. So I don't know. Anyway, maybe I'm just being nitpicky. I don't mean to, but I want to be clear to the public what we're voting on.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Councilor Barlow, I had Councilor Kane next in queue, and then we'll go back to you. So Councilor Kane.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry. I had Councilor Kane next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then we'll go to you, Councilor
He's fine to go first. What I was going to say, just so Councilor Broderick mentioned making I don't know, some sort of amendment to the amendment, lines 50 to 52, and I was just wondering, as a point of information, if that's something that Councilor Barlow can. I don't think he's either accepted or rejected that, but maybe that could move us along, because it seems like that might be specifically the most objectionable, line or two, and maybe just that particular striking that Councilor Broderick mentioned like 20 minutes ago could be the one modification to the amendment that might get us to a point where we can all live with it. Okay. Just throwing that out there.
Okay. Councilor Broderick had previously suggested that we could divide the question on the amendment, but to confirm, Councilor Kane, are you moving to amend the amendment such that lines, I think, 49 to 52 in the proposed amendment would revert back to its original form?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a motion from Councilor Kane to amend the amendment. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Councilor Bergman. I suppose the question to you, Councilor Barlow, is whether or not you are friendly to that amendment?
I am not.
Okay. Is there anyone that wishes to speak further to the amendment on lines 49 to 52?
I would.
Okay, Councilor Kane first, do you want the floor back upon a second?
Well, just very briefly, if we are going to find unanimity here or close to it, I think working with the amendment, which was I think a significant amendment, I think it involved a whole bunch of pieces, just working, removing the most objectionable single piece, I think is the only way that we're going to get to close to unanimity. So I just hope we all recognize that.
Thank you, Councilor Kane. Councilor Barlow?
Yes, thank you. And I wanted to respond to, I guess, talk to the amendment, also respond to Councilor Newbeezer's comments, because I think they're pertinent. It's like, we don't know what our bureau would look like. We didn't know in the underlying resolution. We don't know what it would be in an amended resolution, and that was sort of my whole point. It's like we're putting forward a solution in the form of an ordinance that we're going to create when we don't even know exactly what it's going to be. We don't know how it impacts any of the stakeholders. So in my mind, we're putting a solution ahead of a process and trying to back a process into it. We need to do this work. I am committed to doing this work in good faith. I want to see us create something and improve our climate policy. But I can't assume that we're gonna have an ordinance to come out of it, because we haven't done any of the work. I would like an ordinance to come out of it, and I will pledge to my fellow TUC members that I'll work hard on that. But I think it's backwards to assume we're gonna have an ordinance come out of a process that we haven't even defined what the outcome is, and we don't know what the work is or how the stakeholders are affected. So that's why I'm not supportive of dividing the question or amending the question to remove these lines, amendment to the amendment to the amendment. Sorry, it is getting late. And why I put forward this amendment to begin with. It's like one of the principal reasons, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Just so folks can follow along here, I have shared my screen with the original amendment.
President Travers?
Yes?
I don't know, when you get to where the queue, I would like to just be recognized on a very small
Yes.
point.
You will be next up, just for
Thank you.
folks' information here. The proposed amendment to the amendment, and confirm this for me, Councilor Kane, is that the track changes in lines 49 to 52 would be removed, and it would be the original underlying language if your amendment passes. Is that correct, Councilor Kane?
Just want to confirm with Councilor Broderick, he was the one who suggested it.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
Councilor Bergman.
The beauty of the original and something that has not been changed is found in lines 32 through 36 in the amendment, which basically says that there needs to be reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore it's going to necessitate, regardless of all the other gobbledygook that's in there, the adoption of stronger policies to reduce emissions in the building sector. That's what a building emissions reduction ordinance is supposed to do. That's what we're looking at. It is open on purpose because there can be incentives, there can be regulations, there can be disclosure, and we have defined it in here as well as we need to. So a criticism of the original is, in my mind, unwarranted, and to the extent to which that follows through as a criticism of the amendment. I've criticized the amendment, but that is not one way that I'm going to, excuse me, to criticize this. We know what this is meant to do, and we should not just consider it. We need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Is there any other councilor that wants to speak on the amendment to the amendment, or can we go to a vote on that? Councilor Newbeezer. I will say that my strong preference here would be for us to be able to call all votes before 10:30 and not have to suspend our rules. But Councilor Newbeezer, go ahead.
I know, I'm very sorry. Because the process is really important and I think it's fair. I guess from my perspective, given the how nuanced this resolution is and how big of a topic this is, to say that, any individual counselor or, to do the stakeholder outreach that I've heard would be wanted is just like an unreasonable workload to put on one counselor. And this resolution doesn't say this is the outcome. It says, let's have a process by which we get that input, which I think makes it more democratic, makes it more public, and ultimately more relevant stakeholders are at the table and we're going to get better policy. So I guess, I just want to note, in principle, I am partial, but I think this is the most effective sort of workflow to get this thing done. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. I am going to call the question on the amendment to the amendment, and then after this question, we will still have the amendment, unless Councilor Kane, I'll give you the last word. It is your amendment to the amendment.
Just
so-
super briefly, looking at it more closely, I mean, the original, for those lines, it says, drafting for referral. It doesn't say even referring, and it certainly doesn't say voting for, when it does come back before the full council. So, I think if this is going to go to committee with bipartisan support, with any bipartisan support, then this is the bare minimum.
Okay. We're going to call the question on the amendment to the amendment, and the question is whether or not lines 49 to 52 should be reverted back to this paragraph, this resolved clause in the original resolution. I think we should call the roll.
Councilor Barlow?
No.
Councilor Bergman?
Yes.
Councilor Broderick?
Yes.
Councilor Carpenter?
No?
Councilor Doherty?
No.
Councilor Grant?
Yes.
Councilor Kane?
Yes.
Councilor Litwin?
No.
Councilor McKnight?
No.
Councilor Newbeezer?
Yes.
Councilor Shannon?
No.
City Council President Travers?
No.
5 ayes, 7 nays.
So the amendment to the amendment fails, and we are back to the amendment to the underlying resolution. I do not have any councilors in the queue on the underlying amendment. Councilor Broderick?
Given the recent vote, I'm no longer going to be dividing the question and will now be still voting no for the amendments, but I really appreciate the discussion that we're having on this. I just think it is so important that we are taking this decisive action, and I'm troubled by the shift in the language of that specific clause. I do appreciate the outreach that was done to get a lot of this other stuff included. So thank you, Councilor Barlow.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. Does any other councilor wish to be recognized on the proposed amendment? Right, is that you, Councilor? Okay, Councilor Grant.
I have flashbacks about oversight and accountability, which even with promises and a supposed sense of urgency, we're still not where we need to be. And so that makes me have an even bigger concern about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Seeing no one else in the queue, yeah, Councilor Carpenter?
Just quickly, one of the reasons I favor this amendment is it would give the TOOC, and I believe all the members of the community are so committed, the opportunity to look at a bureau or multiple bureaus, because it's just plain not defined. We could do a disclosure ordinance tomorrow, and I might be happy to do that. If we're going to fine people for building performance standards and not living up to them, that probably requires a vote of the public. Deciding what building performance standards you need is a huge amount of work, and we just need to be mindful of that. And that's, I think, all this is trying to do. I don't think it's to kick it down the road, it's to take the time to do the work we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. With no one else in the queue, we will call the question. The question is on the amendment in its entirety, as moved by Councilor Barlow and as posted on Civic Clerk. And the clerk should call the roll, please.
Councilor Barlow?
Yes.
Councilor Bergman?
No.
Councilor Broderick?
No.
Councilor Carpenter?
Yes.
Councilor Doherty?
Yes.
Councilor Grant?
No.
Counselor Kane,
No.
Counselor Litwin,
Yes.
Counselor McKnight,
Yes.
Counselor Newbeezer,
No.
Counselor Shannon,
Yes.
City Council President Travers,
Yes.
7 ayes, 5 nays.
So we now return to the underlying resolution as amended. The time is now 10:26. If there are any other counselors who wish to be recognized, we have a couple minutes here before 10:30. Counselor Barlow?
Thank you. I just want to once again express my sincere intention to make best efforts on this and try to bring forward a resolution, or excuse me, an ordinance. I can't guarantee we'll get there. I think we have a lot of work to do, but I will work on it in good faith. So if that helps any of my colleagues who just voted no on the amended language, just know that.
Councilor Broderick, and then I think we'll call that the last word. Councilor Broderick.
Thank you for letting me get the last word in. I will be voting yes on the resolution because I'm ready to go into the TUC and fight like hell to make sure we get an ordinance out of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. With that, we will call the question on the underlying resolution as amended, and if the clerk could call the roll on this too, that'd be great.
Counselor Barlow,
Yes.
Counselor Bergman,
Yes.
Counselor Broderick,
Yes.
Counselor Carpenter,
Yes.
Counselor Doherty,
Yes.
Counselor Grant,
Yes.
Counselor Kane,
Yes.
Counselor Litwin,
Yes.
Counselor McKnight,
Yes.
Counselor Newbeezer,
Yes.
Counselor Shannon,
Yes.
City Council President Travers,
Yes.
12 ayes.
Great. So that passes unanimously. And we'll look forward to the work of the TUC. So thank you very much for that debate. That turns now to item 10 on our agenda. Typically, we have to we do need to suspend our rules if it's the deliberative agenda, but because we are now done with our deliberative agenda, we can turn to item 10, which is committee reports. Are there any counselors who have a committee report? Counselor Shannon.
As mentioned, the Ordinance Committee will be meeting this Thursday at 9 a.m. We have unfortunately, sorry.
Did we change it to 11 or 11:30?
We changed it to 11:30. We did? Okay.
I
gotta
believe.
I'm gonna
11
let
I think
other
11.
people talk, and so I can check my communication with the city attorney.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. We will get back to the timing of the ordinance meeting. Any other counselors with a committee report? Councilor Barlow.
I just want to make sure I get the name right. I think it's the Board and Committee Nominating Committee.
The Boards and Commissions Nominating Committee.
Thank you. We'll be having our first meeting on Thursday, which would be the 23rd, at 6 o'clock in the room upstairs, and whose name I also don't know. The Queen City room, perhaps? Okay, excellent.
Very good.
And also, the Transportation, Energy, and Utility Committee will be meeting next Tuesday, the 28th, at 5 p.m. at 645 Pine Street.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Councilor Shannon, back to you on ordinance.
A point of information, did we not change that to the 23rd?
I hope not, but.
Well, I think
Ordinance, you mean?
we have meetings that are coming up. They are all publicly posted and warned on Civic Clerk, and
I'm not there.
we'll encourage the public to confirm the time, which will be accurate as listed online. But Councilor Shannon, did you have an update or?
Yes. I want the council to be aware that Councilor Bergman is correct. Our meeting is from 11 to 12. I think we have a hard stop to discuss the necessary ordinance changes related to the budget. And we have not been able to find a room yet. It is not yet on the calendar. And it may end up being online only. So just to be aware of that and to please give any feedback to your ordinance committee, which includes Councilor McKnight, Councilor Bergman, and myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Does any other councilor have a committee report? Or Councilor Grant?
Thank you. The REIB committee will be meeting tomorrow, 5:30, hybrid meeting. On the agenda, we'll be discussing Juneteenth, which will be happening Saturday, June 15th. So I look forward to that update. And also, everyone, mark your calendars for the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Any other committee reports? All right. I will not have a city council president update, but before that, item 11, city council general affairs. Does any councilor wish to speak in general affairs? Councilor Bergman.
I just want to thank the council for your support in funding the Old North End Cleanup Day. We had it on this last Saturday. We had this huge, two very big roll-off to collect trash. And then we had a couple of dump trucks to collect scrap metal, and we had another vehicle to collect tires. This thing started at 10 o'clock, and we were filled up by like 12 o'clock on both of them. We obviously had a lot more, and without the support of the council, we would not have been able to do that, and we would probably have an awful lot more garbage in the street being dumped. So thank you. People were very appreciative of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman, and all our Old North End councilors, Councilor Bergman, Grant, and Kane, for putting that event together. It looked great. Anyone else on councilor general affairs? Councilor Litwin.
Well, I wasn't sure if our PAC people would bring this up or not, but on the first meeting I attended, I sort of mentioned in passing the issue that is happening with Keeslake Park. I've been in contact with many of the councilors here about it. I want to thank Councilor Grant as well for just how responsive and invested she is in helping to advocate and protect this park. And so this Wednesday, I don't want to speak for PAC, but this Wednesday at noon, you're holding a meeting, and Cindy White, Director of Parks and Rec, will be there to present and give an update on the remediation plan related to the tree removal. The cost is rising, and it's not entirely clear from my perspective what that final number is at this point. But it's definitely exceeding 23,000 at this point. And I think there's been a lack of public conversation. And so that has started to finally change a little bit, and I'm really appreciative of the PAC committee for seeking out an update. And I would say the last thing I heard was we had quite a few folks fill a room at my community coffee hour in my apartment building. And I would say the resounding theme was distrust. Distrust in what happened and in the process, and a desire to see a strong oversight plan for future projects that abut the conservation land that abuts this. And I want to be clear from my perspective as a counselor, it's the permit holder's responsibility to maintain those boundaries and respect them at all times. But if the same contractor that made this error is going to be recontracted for future projects, including the handicap accessible pathway that goes through that same conservation land, I would be hopeful that our PAC sees an oversight plan related to that from the developers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Litwin. Anyone else on general affairs? Then, Mayor, we will turn to you for the last item on our agenda.
All right. I
love this last item. No, I don't, actually. So, okay, bear with me. So I usually organize this in 3 or 4 general areas to give you an idea of what is happening with the administration. We've talked at length today about budget, and so just not to belabor the point, but I just want to remind people that this Wednesday, May 22nd, and next Wednesday, May 29th, are the last 2 budget information meetings where we'll be reviewing the remaining general fund and the water division. So it's general fund. So this coming Wednesday is all the DPW related things, including our enterprise funds that are related to DPW, and then the final set of general fund departments on the 29th, which will include police and fire in particular, just from our earlier conversation, as well as those strategic investments in community safety, if you want to pick and choose which ones to attend. We received the user fee study mentioned earlier in our discussion today, and we're working through that with impacted departments. I hope to again share that with the council very soon. We convened, I mentioned this in the earlier conversation a little bit too, we convened, I believe it's the first time really across departments, including department heads, staff, and some community partners on community safety to get an initial read on what would be useful strategic investments in the short term, meaning immediately, if we could find additional revenue. Also accompanying that will be the start of using community advisors, which I appreciate Councilors Grant and Councilors Doherty for serving on this. I hope I have that right. Community safety advisors to help broaden the conversation from community folks and impacted people on what else we should be thinking about beyond city staff generating those ideas. So that starts tomorrow. We are working on trying to draft a camping policy that makes sense for this city ahead of us getting too far into the summer season. As soon as we have something that's there, I want to share that with councilors in a draft format to kind of acknowledge where we might have some opportunities to do things differently than last year. Of course, with a commitment to dignity, but also understanding the need for legal and ordinance matters to be vetted. Couple things within my office. The amazingly professional and highly capable Emma Allen is going to be transitioning out of our office. I was able to offer a temporary position when we started this in the transition, and because she is very capable and smart and capable, she found an amazing opportunity with the Vermont Community Foundation. So the end of May, I believe the 31st will be her last day. It has been a great honor being able to work with her. I don't know how we would have done this transition without her. And if I could hire 1,000 people in my office, she'd be the first one. And it was just a matter of pre-planned other transitions and other people coming in this fall. So I deeply appreciate her, and we'll do a temporary hire for this summer. So stay tuned about that transition at the end of the month. I wish her, and our whole staff wishes her very well. And if the Vermont Community Foundation doesn't treat her right, I told her to come right back. Also, some of you interfaced with Darren Fergeron, who was our transition director. She was working part-time through really April and May to help us get systems up and running. Her last day was May 15th. We will deeply miss her. She also had a prior job and transition to Philadelphia, so we also wish her well, and again, could not have done this without her. We, let's see, just to community safety a little more specifically, we also held a cross-department meeting. I'm holding bi-weekly meetings with department heads to do emergent issues with them every other week, and then a monthly meeting with them where we do some deeper dives into bigger issues. And in one of these bi-weekly meetings, the library spoke about how they've become an epicenter of a lot of increased issues of community safety. So on the range, including hand-to-hand drug deals in their front circle area, increased needles in their back area, just in being overwhelmed with the amount of shifting in behaviors that are happening in that general area, including the Memorial Block. And I mention this because that was named, we were able to call a sub meeting on this. And I really pushed our department heads to do more than just the response I've heard a lot, which is we just don't have enough police officers. And I said, I hear that. And what next? And so we are developing something for what next. It's in its infancy, so I don't want to speak too much beyond that. But I've appreciated the leadership in the police department. I appreciate the library saying the thing, which is a phrase I'm using a lot with department heads, because we need to start doing something differently and immediately taking action. And that also includes better coordination with our partners at the state's attorney's office improve our communication, and do things differently. So I use that as a small example. I'm hoping within a couple of weeks we have something there to start doing differently around the library to make sure that our community is able to safely use that space. Let's see. Also, one last piece about sort of mayor's updates. We are beginning work with the REIB staff on some new ideas around a redesign of that department, new leadership opportunities. Karen Durfee's been serving as the interim director for that department. And I am excited to be looking with existing staff to what it lays ahead in fiscal year 25 and engaging the community more in this important work. So I want to speak to that because I know there was some media attention to what is happening next there, and I'm very hopeful about what lies ahead. Equity work is incredibly important to me. It should be integrated in what we all do, and so I'm really looking forward to working with the staff and really making sure they're set up for success in the coming year. Let's see. We are posting the planning director position this week to fill the vacancy anticipated for Megan Tuttle at the end of June. We're also posted last week the city engineer position that you heard about Norm Baldwin exiting. If you know good people, please encourage people to apply. Also, news as of today, department head, our director of HR, Karen Durfee, indicated she is not interested in seeking reappointment with the city. She's moving on to some other opportunities that have come her way. She's been very supportive of me, which I appreciate, but we now have another anticipated vacancy, but that we'll get to work on making sure that we carry on her legacy and do well with leadership at HR. And then just very briefly on community engagement, I continue to meet with many people ranging from the Lake Champlain Sailing Center to Sarah Holbrook Center to the Vermont Queer Legal Professionals Network and many people in between. Another one to highlight is I attended the full Board of Trustees meeting for the Howard Center to share my vision around community safety and better and stronger partnerships with our designated agency. It was a very useful use of an hour of my time to understand their concerns and for them to hear my priorities as the new mayor. Let's see, and a couple other quick things. I met with the Decker Tower residents, as was mentioned by the president of their association, Kathy Foley. I am concerned about making sure that the money that the city has invested for increasing security and getting good systems to support the residents, 160 or so folks who live in that apartment building, to get the support that they deserve. And I was disappointed to hear things are not going as I anticipated they would with this agreement that was signed by the prior administration on April 1st. And so I've requested weekly reports. The first one was due Thursday. I just want to be clear, I'm trying to work in partnership with BHA. They can improve even on their weekly reports because systems are not in place yet and time is ticking away, and this is $38,000 or so invested from our housing trust fund to make their living conditions better. So I am following this very closely and will be continuing to ask BHA to continue to improve and to see that we're stewarding these resources effectively, but more importantly, that we're listening to the residents at Decker Towers. And finally, I already mentioned the town hall with businesses earlier today, or maybe this evening, I don't know. The last thing I'll say is that I was proud to co-sign a letter with our chief of police and the chief of fire to support H72. This is my legislative update. As you know, the session ended. We wrote a letter collectively to Governor Scott to convey to him how incredibly important now that H72 is primarily a Burlington bill for us to host the pilot overdose prevention center, that we are standing in support of this, that we ask him not to veto that bill. I also added an invitation to the governor to please come to Burlington, and I will personally follow up with him. And I think it's long overdue that the governor of the state of Vermont come and visit the largest city here and see all the wonderful things, but also the challenges we're facing firsthand, because there's no replacement for that. I have no response yet, but I will be following up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Newbeeser. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you. At 10:45.